They say funerals are where you say goodbye, but my mom's burial started the most insane FBI chase in 10 years. While she was lowered 6 feet under in the rain, my stepdad was posting photos from Hawaii with his mistress. I was ready to destroy my phone until a text appeared from my dead mother's number, telling me she was still alive. That is when I learned that for the wealthy, dying is sometimes just a chess move. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I deal in absolutes. In my line of work as a forensic auditor for Veritas Insight, there is no gray area. A ledger balances, or it does not. Money is either where it is supposed to be, or it has been stolen. But standing here in the relentless, freezing drizzle of a Seattle afternoon, staring at the mahogany casket being lowered into the wet earth, nothing made sense. The world had tilted on its axis, and the numbers were not adding up. The rain in the Pacific Northwest does not wash things clean. It just makes everything heavy. It soaked into the wool of my black suit, making it cling to my skin like a second layer of grief. Around me, a sea of black umbrellas bobbed in the wind, sheltering the cream of Seattle society. They were here for Lydia Caldwell, the matriarch, the heiress to a dynasty worth $450 million. But mostly, they were here to see who would crack first. I stood at the edge of the grave, my hands clasped behind my back, fighting the urge to straighten the ribbon on a nearby wreath that was slightly off-center. My therapist calls it mild OCD. I call it a necessity for survival in a chaotic world. Order is the only defense against entropy. But there was no order here. My mother was 60 years old. She was vibrant. She hiked the Cascades. She practiced yoga 3 times a week. Yet the official report stated she died of a sudden cardiac arrest in her sleep. Just like that. A heart that had loved so fiercely just stopped. No history of heart disease, no warning signs. And because her husband, the grieving widower, had insisted on respecting her religious wishes for a swift burial, there had been no autopsy. I looked around the circle of mourners. Cousins I had not seen in a decade were dabbing dry eyes with silk handkerchiefs. Business partners from the tech sector were checking their watches, calculating how much billable time this show of respect was costing them. They whispered. I could hear the low hum of their gossip rising above the sound of the rain hitting the canopy. "Where is he?" a woman in a fox fur coat murmured to her husband. "Where is Marcus?" "Distraught, I heard," the husband replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Locked himself away. Couldn't bear to see her go into the ground. Tragic, really. Tragic." That was the word of the day. Marcus Thorne, my stepfather, the CEO of Origin Bio, the man who had swept my mother off her feet 10 years ago with his charm and his charity galas. He was 56, handsome in that manufactured, polished way that politicians and serial killers often are. He was supposed to be standing right next to me. He was the chief mourner. Protocol dictated he throw the first handful of dirt. But the space beside me was empty. A void that screamed louder than any eulogy. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I tried to ignore it. Checking your phone at your mother's funeral is a sin, even for a man who believes in data more than God. But the vibration persisted. A notification, then another. It was not a call. It was a social media alert. I pulled the phone out, shielding the screen from the rain with my palm. I told myself I was checking for an emergency from the office. Maybe a client needed an urgent freeze on an account. But my thumb, driven by a dark intuition, opened Instagram. The algorithm, cruel and efficient, served it to me on a silver platter. There was Marcus. The photo had been posted 3 minutes ago. The geolocation tag read, Four Seasons Resort, Maui, Hawaii. The contrast hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Here, the world was gray cold and smelling of wet lilies and mud. On the screen, the world was saturated in gold and azure. The sun was blazing. Marcus was reclining on a white lounge chair, shirtless, his skin tanned and oiled. In one hand, he held a crystal glass filled with a deep ruby liquid. The caption was just a champagne glass emoji. but it was the details that made my vision blur with rage. I recognized the label on the bottle, sitting on the table next to him. Romanée Conti Vintage, 1945. A bottle worth more than most people earn in a decade. My mother's favorite wine. He was drinking her favorite wine to celebrate her death. And he was not alone. Wrapped around his waist was a woman. She was facing away from the camera, looking out at the ocean, but I knew that profile. I knew the sharp angle of the jaw and the cascade of blonde hair. She was wearing a red bikini that left nothing to the imagination. Elena Rostova, the chief legal officer of Origen Bio. The woman who was supposed to be handling the estate's probate. The woman who had sat across from my mother at Thanksgiving dinners, smiling and pouring gravy. They were not just colleagues. The intimacy in the photo was undeniable. His hand rested possessively on her hip. His smile was not the smile of a grieving widower seeking solitude to heal. It was the smile of a man who had just pulled off the heist of the century. It was the grin of a predator who had finally eaten his fill and was now basking in the sun to digest. My grip on the phone tightened. I could feel the glass screen protector starting to crack under the pressure of my thumb. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the device against the granite tombstone that bore my mother's name. I wanted to grab the priest by his collar and show him this picture to show everyone here the grieving saint they were eulogizing. I closed my eyes, taking a sharp breath, trying to slow my heart rate. I am a forensic auditor. I follow the evidence. I do not act on emotion. I act on facts. Fact number 1. 68% of wealthy men who engage in extramarital affairs will leave their wives if the wife becomes terminally ill. I had read the sociological studies. I knew the data. It is a cold, hard statistic about the fragility of male vows when money and mortality collide. Fact number 2. Skipping a funeral to go on vacation is not just adultery. It is a declaration of war. It is a level of disrespect that transcends bad morals and enters the realm of sociopathy. He was not just cheating. He was celebrating. Ethan, I opened my eyes. My Aunt Clara was looking at me with concern. Ethan, dear, are you all right? You look pale. I am fine, I said, my voice sounding robotic even to my own ears. I just need a moment. It is hard, I know, she said, reaching out to touch my arm. Marcus is suffering too, you know. Everyone grieves in their own way. I almost laughed. A bitter, jagged sound that died in my throat. If only she knew. I looked back down at the phone, ready to close the app, when the screen changed. The Instagram feed disappeared, replaced by the incoming message interface. A text message had just arrived. The sender ID made my blood freeze in my veins. It simply said, Mom. I stared at the name. My brain refused to process it. Mom was in the box. The box was 6 feet down. I had watched them seal it. I had touched the cold wood. Dead people do not send text messages. Maybe it was a delayed message. A scheduled send she had set up before the cardiac arrest? Or maybe it was a hacker. Someone cruel. Someone who knew Marcus was in Hawaii and wanted to twist the knife in my gut. I opened the message. I am not dead. Do not look back. Come to the old warehouse at Terminal 4 right now. The phone slipped from my fingers, tumbling onto the wet grass. I scrambled to pick it up, wiping the mud off the screen. I read it again. I am not dead. The syntax. The punctuation. It was precise. My mother was an English literature major before she took over the family business. She never used abbreviations. She never missed a comma. A hacker might have said, I'm not dead, or come to the warehouse. But this was formal. This was her. But that was impossible. Logic warred with hope in my mind. The forensic auditor in me screamed that this was a trap, a scam, a cruel anomaly. The sun in me felt a spark ignite in the cold, wet darkness of my soul. I looked at the grave again. The priest was sprinkling holy water now. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If she was in there, who sent the text? If she was not in there, then who the hell was I burying? I looked around. Had anyone else seen my reaction? The faces were still somber masks of polite mourning. No one was looking at me. They were looking at the hole in the ground. I could not stay here. I could not listen to another hypocritical prayer. If there was even a 1% chance, a fraction of a percentage point, that the message was real, I had to know. And if it was a prank, I would find the person responsible, and I would destroy them with the same efficiency I use to dismantle fraudulent corporations. I turned on my heel mud, squelching under my dress shoes. "Ethan!" Aunt Clara called out again, her voice rising in alarm. "The service is not over. Where are you going?" "I have to go," I said, not looking back. "I have to go now." "But the reception, the guests." I ignored her. I ignored them all. I walked faster, my stride lengthening, until I was almost running through the rows of headstones. The rain lashed at my face, mixing with the sweat that had broken out on my forehead. I reached my car, a black sedan parked at the edge of the cemetery lane. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I got in, slammed the door, and locked it. The silence inside the car was deafening compared to the storm outside. I punched the coordinates into the GPS, Terminal 4, the Port District. It was on the other side of the city, a wasteland of rusted shipping containers and abandoned logistics hubs. It was the last place a woman like Lydia Caldwell would ever be found. I started the engine. The wipers slashed back and forth, counting down the seconds. I floored the accelerator tires, spinning on the wet asphalt before gripping. I tore out of the cemetery gates, leaving the dead behind to chase a ghost. The drive was a blur of gray highway and red taillights. I drove with a reckless precision, weaving through the traffic on I-5. My mind was racing, analyzing the variables. Hypothesis A. Mom is dead. Marcus has her phone. He is taunting me. But he is in Hawaii. I saw the live timestamp. Unless he has a remote access tool? Unlikely. Marcus is a narcissist, not a tech genius. Hypothesis B. Mom is dead. A third party has her phone. A blackmailer? A thief? Hypothesis C. Mom is alive. Hypothesis C defied all medical and physical laws. I had seen the death certificate. I had seen the paramedics take her body away. But I had not seen the body at the funeral home. It had been a closed casket, Marcus had insisted. She wanted us to remember her as she was, he had said. God, I was an idiot. I had let my grief blind me to the procedural irregularities. A closed casket, no autopsy, immediate burial. It was a textbook cover-up. I should have seen it. I should have demanded verification. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. The pain was grounding. I exited the highway and descended into the industrial district. The scenery changed from glass skyscrapers to corrugated iron and barbed wire. The rain seemed to fall harder here, washing the grime off the shipping containers, only to reveal more rust underneath. The streets were empty. This was the part of Seattle that tourists never saw, the part that smelled of diesel salt water and neglect. Terminal 4 loomed ahead. It was a relic of the 1980s, mostly defunct now. Giant cranes stood like skeletal dinosaurs against the leaden sky. I slowed the car, my headlights cutting through the gloom. The road was potholed and flooded in patches. I checked the message again. Old warehouse. There was only one structure that fit the description. A massive corrugated metal shed at the end of the pier, its paint peeling in long, jagged strips. The number 4 was painted on the side in fading black paint. I killed the engine. The silence returned heavier this time. The only sound was the rain drumming on the roof and the distant cry of a seagull. I reached into the glove compartment. I did not carry a gun. I was an auditor, not a cop. But I had a heavy-duty flashlight and a tire iron under the seat. I took the flashlight. If this was a trap, a tire iron would not save me against a bullet. I stepped out of the car. The wind off the Puget Sound was biting. It smelled of dead fish and oil. I pulled my coat collar up and walked toward the dark maw of the warehouse entrance. A small side door was slightly ajar, creaking rhythmically in the wind. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around to call the police. But the image of Marcus in Hawaii, the Romane Conti, the red bikini, it burned in my mind. It fueled me. If my mother was dead, I had nothing left to lose. If she was alive, I had everything to fight for. I pushed the door open. It groaned, a metal shriek that echoed into the darkness. I stepped inside. The air in the warehouse was stagnant and cold. It was vast, the ceiling lost in the shadows. Stacks of rotting wooden pallets lined the walls. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, distinct and lonely. "Mom?" I called out. My voice cracked. It sounded small in the cavernous space. Silence. I took another step. "Mom? It is Ethan. I am here." Nothing but the sound of wind whistling through a hole in the roof. I gripped the flashlight tighter, my thumb hovering over the switch. I felt like a fool. It was a prank. Of course it was a prank. I had left my mother's funeral to chase a text message into a derelict building. I was losing my mind. I turned to leave, disgust rising in my throat. Disgust at Marcus, disgust at the world, but mostly disgust at myself for hoping. Then I heard it. It was a sound distinct from the wind or the settling of the building. It was mechanical, precise. Oiled metal sliding against metal. It was the sound of a gun slide being racked. And it came from directly behind me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I stood perfectly still, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I did not turn around. I knew the physics of the situation. I was exposed. I was unarmed. And whoever was behind me had the advantage. The darkness seemed to press in, suffocating and heavy. The rain outside was a distant memory. Here, there was only the cold barrel of a reality I was not ready to face. The voice that followed was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a death sentence. But no words came yet. Just the heavy silence following that terrifying click. I slowly raised my hands, the flashlight heavy in my palm, and waited for the bullet. "Turn around slowly," the voice commanded. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The voice was raspy, strained like vocal cords that had not been used in days, or perhaps like a throat that had been scorched by chemicals. But beneath the roughness, there was a cadence I knew better than my own heartbeat. It was a cadence that had read me bedtime stories and lectured me on the importance of compound interest. It was a cadence that I had just spent the last 3 hours mourning. I turned. I moved with the agonizing slowness of a man walking through deep water. The beam of my flashlight sliced through the darkness, sweeping across the concrete floor until it hit a pair of muddy combat boots. Then cheap denim jeans, a black hoodie that was 2 sizes too big, and finally the face. I nearly dropped the light. It was her. But it was not the Lydia Caldwell I knew. The woman standing before me holding a snub-nosed .38 Special was a stranger inhabiting my mother's skin. The elegant silver blonde bob that had been her trademark for 20 years was gone. In its place was a jagged, uneven chop, dyed a harsh, flat black that made her skin look translucent. Her cheekbones, usually soft and rounded, jutted out sharply. She looked like a famine survivor. She looked like a fugitive. "Mom!" The words scraped out of my throat, raw and disbelieving. She lowered the gun. Her shoulders, which had been set in a rigid line of tension, suddenly collapsed. "Ethan," she whispered. I closed the distance between us in 2 strides. I did not care about the gun. I did not care about the damp, freezing warehouse. I grabbed her, pulling her into a hug that was desperate and terrified. She felt frail in my arms, like a bird made of hollow bones. But she was warm. She was solid. Her heart was beating against my chest, a frantic staccato rhythm that proved against all logic and medical science that she was alive. "I saw the coffin," I choked out, burying my face in the rough fabric of her hoodie. "I saw them put you in the ground. I touched the wood." "It is okay," she said, her hand coming up to stroke the back of my head, a reflex from my childhood. "I am here. I am real." She pulled away first. Her eyes, Usually a calm blue were darting around the warehouse shadows, with the hyper-vigilance of a hunted animal. We do not have much time, Ethan. He has eyes everywhere. How? I demanded, my brain finally rebooting the forensic auditor, taking over the grieving son. The death certificate was signed. The paramedics declared you dead on the scene. Cardiac arrest, no pulse, no respiration. Lydia Caldwell, the heiress, who had never known a day of physical hardship in her life, checked the cylinder of her revolver before tucking it into her waistband. Tetrodotoxin, she said flatly. I stared at her. Pufferfish poison. A microdose, she explained, her voice clinical, stripping the horror of the situation down to bare facts. Derived from a supplier I found on the dark web 6 months ago. If you take just the right amount, it blocks the sodium channels in the nervous system. It induces a state of suspended animation. Heart rate drops to 3 beats per minute. Breathing becomes imperceptible. Pupils fixed and dilated. To a paramedic rushing to a call at 3 in the morning, I was a corpse. To a doctor without an EKG machine immediately attached, I was dead on arrival. You could have killed yourself, I said, horror washing over me. That is Russian roulette with biology. I was already dead, Ethan, she snapped, her eyes flashing with a sudden terrifying anger. Marcus was going to kill me tonight. Friday was the rehearsal. Tonight was supposed to be the curtain call. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a stack of crates, where she had set up a small, battery-powered lantern. He thinks he is a genius, but he is predictable. The merger with Ziegler Pharmaceuticals is scheduled for Monday morning. The papers are drawn up. The only thing missing was my signature as the majority shareholder of Origen Bio. If I am alive, I have veto power. If I am dead, control of the trust reverts to my spouse for a 90-day probate period. Just enough time for him to sign the deal, liquidate the assets, and vanish. So you beat him to the punch, I said, putting the pieces together. You faked it before he could make it real. I had to, she said. But the poison was the easy part. Getting out of the morgue was the expensive part. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, something she had never touched in her life, and lit one with shaking hands. Dr. Vance, the chief medical examiner for King County. I know him, I said. I audited a charity he sits on. He has a gambling problem. He owes $300,000 to loan sharks in Macau, my mother said, exhaling a plume of blue smoke. I paid it off. In exchange, he swapped my dental records with a Jane Doe, a homeless woman who died of an overdose 2 days prior and had no next of kin. He put her body in my casket. He falsified the paperwork. And he injected me with the antidote before the embalming process could start. He wheeled me out the back door in a laundry cart an hour before the funeral home picked up the box. I looked at my mother with a newfound sense of awe and terror. This was not the woman who hosted garden parties. This was a tactical operator. She had been planning this for months, right under the nose of a man who watched her every move. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, a pang of hurt cutting through the shock. I could have helped. I would have protected you. You couldn't, she said, shaking her head. Ethan, look at your phone. Don't unlock it. Just look at the camera lens. I pulled my phone out. He has Pegasus spyware installed on every device we own, she said. He knows your passwords. He reads your emails before you do. He tracks your location in real time. If I had told you, his algorithms would have flagged the keyword conversation. If I had sent you a note, his hidden cameras in the house would have seen it. I had to go dark, completely dark. I had to die to get off his radar. She reached into her hoodie pocket again and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It looked innocuous, but the way she held it suggested it weighed a ton. This is it, she said, pressing it into my hand. This is the start. Before I took the poison, I managed to mirror his private server for 12 minutes. It is fragmented, but it is enough to start an audit trail. I squeezed the metal drive. Proof of the murder plot? Proof of everything, she said. He is not just stealing from the company, Ethan. He is hollowing it out. He is funneling millions into shell companies that do not exist. But he is not keeping the money. He is moving it. Fast. Moving it where? Hawaii was not a vacation, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He did not go there to mourn. He went there to meet them. Them? The facilitators, she said. The people who wash money for cartels and rogue states. Marcus isn't just an embezzler. He is trying to buy his way into a global laundering network. He needs the merger capital to pay his entry fee. That is why he is celebrating. He thinks he has won. He thinks I am rotting in the ground and you are too broken by grief to look at the books. A cold fury settled in my stomach. It was a familiar feeling. It was the sensation I got right before I tore apart a corrupt CEO's defense in a deposition. Marcus Thorne had made a fatal error. He assumed his wife was a helpless victim, and his stepson was a rigid, uncreative bean counter. He had no idea that he had just created his own worst nightmare. We cannot stay here, I said, checking my watch. If he is tracking my phone, he knows I left the cemetery. He knows I am stationary at the port. He might not know you are alive, but if he has hired private security, they will be coming to check on me. I have nowhere to go, Lydia said. My credit cards are flagged. My face is on every obituary page in Seattle. I am a ghost, Ethan. Ghosts do not have hotel reservations. I do, I said. Come with me. I led her out of the warehouse, moving quickly through the rain. We got into my car. I stripped the battery out of my phone and tossed it into the back seat. It was a basic precaution, but necessary. Where are we going? She asked, as I reversed out of the shadows, keeping the headlights off until we hit the main road. I have a place, I said. I call it the Bunker. It is a small apartment in a pre-war building in the University District. I bought it 5 years ago under a blind trust held by a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The utility bills are paid by money orders. There is no internet connection, no smart devices. It does not exist in any database linked to the name Ethan Caldwell. She looked at me surprised. Why do you have a safe house, Ethan? You are an auditor. I investigate dangerous people, Mom, I said, merging onto the highway and keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror, scanning for tails. Sometimes people who steal billions of dollars do not like being caught. I learned a long time ago that in my line of work, you always need an exit strategy. The drive was tense. Every set of headlights behind us felt like an enemy. Every siren in the distance made my muscles tighten. My mother sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the rain-slicked city she had ruled for decades now, an alien landscape to her. We reached the safe house without incident. It was a nondescript brick building, the kind that housed graduate students and struggling artists. We took the stairs to the 4th floor. I unlocked the door with a physical key. No key cards, no biometrics. The apartment was sparse. A single bed, a desk, a heavy-duty safe, and a row of filing cabinets. The air smelled of dust and old paper. It was sterile, orderly, and completely secure. Lydia walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. He will sell the company on Monday, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He will destroy everything my father built, everything I worked for. No, I said, walking over to the desk. I powered on my air-gapped laptop a machine that had never touched a public Wi-Fi network. I plugged in the USB drive she had given me. He thinks he is on a timeline, but he just handed us the clock. I watched the encryption software load. Lines of code scrolled down the screen, green against black. I looked at my mother. She had taken off the oversized hoodie. Underneath, she was wearing a simple black t-shirt. Her arms were thin, but her posture had returned. She was standing straight. The fear was receding, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He tried to kill you, I said, my voice low. He defiled your funeral. He is mocking your memory while drinking 4-figure wine with his mistress. Yes, she said. Then we are going to take it all, I said. Not just the company. We are going to take his freedom. We are going to take his reputation. We are going to trace every single cent he has stolen, every bribe he has paid, and every lie he has told. I am going to build a forensic map of his life that is so detailed, so damning, that by the time I am done, he will wish he really had died of grief. I cracked my knuckles, a habit I only indulged in when a major audit was about to begin. The screen flashed. Decryption complete. Folders appeared. Offshore accounts. Shell entities. The Chimera Project. You are the client, Mom, I said, pulling up a chair and gesturing for her to sit beside me. And I am the auditor. Let's go to work. Lydia sat down. She looked at the screen, then at me. A small, grim smile touched her lips. It was the first time I had seen her smile in months. Ethan, she said. Find the money. I always do, I replied. I opened the first folder. The numbers flooded the screen, a chaotic jumble of transactions to the untrained eye. To me, it was a narrative. It was a story written in wire transfers and routing numbers. And as I began to scan the columns, scrolling through the data, with the speed of a pianist reading a score, I saw the pattern emerging. Marcus Thorne was not just a thief. He was sloppy, arrogant, and that arrogance was going to be his epitaph. He transferred $1.2 million last week, I said, pointing to a line item. To a consulting firm in Panama. Consulting? Lydia asked. Shadow surveillance, I corrected. He hired private investigators. But look at the date. He paid them the day after you died. Why would a grieving husband need 24-hour surveillance teams after his wife is dead? He suspects, she breathed. Or he is paranoid, I said. Either way, he left a digital fingerprint. And where there is a fingerprint, there is a hand. And where there is a hand, there is a throat to choke. I looked up from the screen. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing nothing away. But inside this room, the storm was just beginning. My mother was back from the dead, and I was about to become the monster that Marcus Thorne never saw coming. Get some rest, Mom, I said, my eyes glued to the glowing screen. I have a lot of reading to do. I can't sleep, she said, pulling a second chair up. Teach me what you are looking for. Okay, I said. Lesson 1. Follow the money. It never lies. People lie. Ledgers don't. We sat there shoulder to shoulder, the glow of the monitor illuminating our faces in the dark room. Two ghosts in a machine hunting a devil in paradise. The game had changed. The pieces were moving. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just observing the chaos. I was orchestrating it. To understand the anatomy of a monster, like Marcus Thorne, you have to ignore the suit. You have to look past the Italian silk, the veneers that cost more than a mid-sized sedan, and the carefully curated board memberships. You have to look at the hunger. I sat in the dim light of the safe house, my eyes burning from staring at the blue light of the monitor. Beside me, my mother was dozing fitfully in the chair, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of mothballs. She looked fragile, but I knew better now. She was a steel trap that had just snapped shut. But to make sure the jaws held, I needed to know exactly what kind of animal we had caught. I opened a new window on the browser and pulled up Marcus's biography. It was a masterpiece of fiction. According to Forbes, he was a self-made prodigy who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps from a working-class neighborhood in Chicago to become a titan of the pharmaceutical industry. The truth, which I had dug up years ago but kept to myself to keep the peace, was far less romantic. Marcus was a grifter. He was a chameleon who had spent the 90s bouncing from one failed venture to another, leaving a trail of lawsuits and angry investors. He did not have a genius for business. He had a genius for women. Specifically, wealthy, lonely women who needed someone to listen to them. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me. It was 10 years ago, the first time he walked into the Caldwell estate. I was 22, fresh out of accounting school, cynical and possessive of my mother's attention. She had been a widow for 5 years, drowning in the responsibilities of the legacy my father had left behind. Then came Marcus. He walked into the foyer with a humility that seemed almost painful. He wiped his feet on the mat 3 times. He held his hat in his hands. He did not look at the grand staircase or the Chihuly chandelier. He looked only at her. "Lydia," he had said, his voice a soft baritone that vibrated with manufactured sincerity. "I am just grateful you let me come over. I do not need dinner. Just your company is enough." He played the part of the perfect gentleman. He fixed the leaky faucet in the garden that the plumbers had overcharged us for. He listened to her talk about her charity work for hours, nodding with eyes that shimmered with what looked like adoration. He made himself small, so she could feel big. He was the mirror that reflected back exactly what she wanted to see. A partner who didn't care about the $450 million, but just wanted the woman. I opened my eyes and looked at the screen. That humble man was gone. In the center of my monitor was a live stream from Instagram. It was happening right now. Marcus was sitting on the aft deck of a yacht off the coast of Maui. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. He was wearing a black linen shirt, unbuttoned, just enough to look casual, but somber. He was looking directly into the camera lens, his eyes wet. "Thank you," he said, his voice catching perfectly on the second syllable. "Thank you all for the outpouring of love. Reading your comments is the only thing keeping me going right now. Lydia was my light, and now that light is gone." He paused to wipe a non-existent tear from his cheek. The comment section on the side of the screen scrolled by at a dizzying speed. "Stay strong, Marcus. She is watching over you. You are so brave." I felt bile rise in my throat. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. But then I saw it. It was subtle, something the casual viewer would miss. But to a forensic auditor, trained to spot the anomaly in the pattern, it was a screaming siren. His right hand was out of the frame. But every few seconds his shoulder would shift slightly, a rhythmic motion. He was not just sitting there. He was caressing someone. And then for a split second, a hand with manicured nails, painted a sharp crimson, entered the bottom corner of the frame, holding a glass of scotch. Marcus took it without looking, his fingers brushing against the hand in a way that was intimate, familiar, and grotesque given the context. Elena. She was sitting right there at his feet, out of sight of the audience, feeding him lines and liquor, while he sold his grief to the public. "Let's see who is paying for the drinks," I muttered to myself. I minimized the video and brought up the banking interface. My mother had given me the master passwords, the ones Marcus thought only she knew, the ones she had memorized and never written down. I logged into his personal accounts. The screen filled with rows of transactions. I started filtering. I was not looking for the big withdrawals yet. I was looking for the behavioral patterns. The devil is in the details. I found a recurring payment that started 3 months ago. It was listed innocuously as consulting fees to a company called Argus Solutions. The amount was staggering, $400,000 a month. That was $1.2 million in the last quarter alone. I ran a background check on Argus Solutions. It was a shell company registered in Nevada, but the operating address led back to a private investigation firm in downtown Seattle. A firm known for its aggressive tactics and lack of moral compass. "Mom," I whispered, though she was asleep. "He was watching you." He hadn't just waited for her to die. He had been tracking her every move. $1.2 million to ensure he knew her schedule, her medical appointments, her calls. He wasn't grieving. He was conducting surveillance on a target. He needed to know exactly when she was vulnerable. He needed to know if she was changing her estate planning. I moved to the next tab, the legal correspondence. This was Elena Rostova's domain. Elena was not just a mistress. To call her a homewrecker was to underestimate her utility. She was the chief legal officer of Origen Bio, a woman with a law degree from Yale, and a soul that had been surgically removed years ago. I pulled up the email chains between Marcus and Elena. They were not love letters. There were no "I miss you" or "I love you" messages. It was purely transactional. They spoke in the language of leverage and liquidation. Subject: the obstacle. Date: January 5, 2026. From E. Rostova to M. Thorne. The prenup is ironclad, Marcus. If you divorce her, you get $10 million and the beach house. That is it. If she dies, however, the trust triggers the spousal transfer clause. But we need to move before the board meeting on the 20th. If she is still the majority shareholder, then she can block the merger. We need her shares in play. I read it again. We need her shares in play. They discussed my mother, not as a human being, but as a blockade. An obstacle to be removed so the river of money could flow. Their relationship was a partnership of sharks. They did not feed on each other. They fed on everything else around them. Elena wanted the power and the cut of the profits. Marcus wanted the freedom and the cash. They were bound together by mutual assured destruction. If one went down, the other fell too. I dug deeper into the legal folder. I was looking for one specific document, the holy grail of inheritance fraud. I found it in a subfolder named Contingency. It was a PDF of a last will and testament. I opened it. The date at the top was January 2nd, 2026, just 2 weeks ago. My eyes scanned the legalese. It revoked all previous wills. It dissolved the charitable foundation my mother had spent 20 years building. And most damning of all, it appointed Marcus Thorne as the sole executor and primary beneficiary of the Caldwell Family Trust. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a signature. Lydia Caldwell. I zoomed in. I have seen my mother's signature thousands of times. On birthday cards, on checks, on legal documents. It has a specific flow, a hesitation on the loop of the L, and a sharp strike on the T in the middle of the name. This signature was too perfect. It lacked the hesitation. It lacked the tremor of a hand that had been slightly shaky from blood pressure medication for the last year. It was a digital tracing. Someone had taken a sample of her signature from an old document, smoothed out the edges in Photoshop, and pasted it here. He forged it, I said aloud. The anger was a cold, hard knot in my chest. He forged the will 2 weeks before he killed her. This changed everything. It wasn't just murder. It was premeditated fraud on a massive scale. According to this document, Marcus now controlled assets worth $450 million. He could sell the company, liquidate the real estate, and drain the accounts, and legally no one could stop him because the paper said it was my mother's dying wish. But why the rush? Why kill her on a Friday night? I went back to the financial records. I checked his credit card statements. The Four Seasons in Maui was just a staging ground. I looked at the travel purchases. There, a transaction made yesterday. Swiss International Airlines. Flight LX41. Departure, Kahului to Zurich, via San Francisco. Date, January 21st, 2026. That was tomorrow, the day after the funeral. But it was the ticket type that made my blood run cold. One way. He was not coming back. He wasn't staying to run Origen Bio. He wasn't staying to mourn. He was going to Zurich, Switzerland, the land of banking secrecy and non-extradition for certain financial crimes, if you had the right residency permits. I pieced the timeline together in my head. Friday, kill Lydia. Saturday/Sunday, feign shock and grief. Monday, the funeral, which he skipped to set up the alibi of being distraught in Hawaii. Tuesday, the board meeting happens in his absence but with his proxy vote, which he now controls via the forged will, approving the sale of the company. The money wires hit the accounts. Wednesday, he flies to Switzerland with Elena. By the time anyone realized the money was gone, he would be sipping hot chocolate in the Alps, untouchable. He was going to burn my mother's legacy to the ground and walk away with $500 million in his pocket. I looked at the screen at the one-way ticket confirmation. "You are not going to Switzerland, Marcus," I whispered. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped. Lydia was awake. She was looking at the screen, her eyes dark circles in her pale face. She saw the will. She saw the signature. She saw the flight ticket. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just leaned in closer, her voice devoid of any warmth. "He forged my name," she said softly. "He stole my name." "We have him, Mom," I said. "This is fraud. This is intent." "It is not enough," she said. "If we go to the police now, he is in Hawaii. He will see the warrant. He will hop on a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty before the cops can even file the paperwork. He has the resources to vanish, Ethan. We cannot scare him off." "Then what do? "We let him think he has won," she said. "We let him come back for the victory lap." I looked at the flight details again. "He is not coming back to Seattle. He is flying to Zurich from Hawaii." "No," Lydia said, pointing to a calendar on the wall. "Look at the date of the merger signing. It requires a physical presence for the final notarization. The bylaws of the company, bylaws my father wrote, demand that the majority shareholder or their executor be physically present in the boardroom for a sale of this magnitude. He thinks he can do it by proxy, but the lawyers will tell him otherwise by tomorrow morning." She was right. The ironclad bureaucracy of the Caldwell legacy was about to become our greatest weapon. "He has to come back," I realized. "He has to walk into that boardroom to sign the paper that turns the company into cash." "And when he does," Lydia said, "we will be waiting." I looked back at the screen at the face of the man who had pretended to be my father for 10 years. The man who was currently receiving thousands of likes for his performance of grief. I cracked my knuckles again. "I need to find out where the money is going before it hits Switzerland," I said. "If he moves it to a numbered account, it is gone forever. I need to find the pipeline." "Follow the rat," Lydia said. "Elena." I clicked on Elena's profile. She is the key. She set up the legal framework. She knows where the bodies are buried. "And she is greedy," Lydia added. "Greedy people make mistakes." I began to type, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. I was going to dissect Elena Rostova's digital life until I found the crack in the armor. The rain outside had stopped, leaving a heavy, suffocating mist over the city. But inside the safe house, the air was electric. We were no longer victims. We were hunters. And the prey was fat happy and completely unaware that the trap had already been set. $1.2 million for a private investigator, I murmured, shaking my head. He should have asked for a refund. They didn't spot the one thing that mattered. "What is that?" Lydia asked. "That you raised a son who knows how to count," I said. I hit enter. The code executed. The hunt for the dirty money began. By 3 a.m, the safe house had ceased to be a residential apartment and had transformed into a forensic command center. I had rearranged the furniture, pushing the single desk against the wall and flanking it with 2 folding tables I found in the closet. 4 monitors salvaged from my storage unit were now glowing in the semi-darkness, their cables snake-like across the floor. The air in the room was thick with the hum of cooling fans and the smell of stale coffee. I sat in the center of this digital spiderweb, my tie discarded, my sleeves rolled up to my elbows. My mother sat behind me on the edge of the bed, watching the screens with a mixture of confusion and awe. She was witnessing the side of me that she had only ever seen on my report cards or in brief descriptions of my job. She was seeing the hunter. "Talk to me, Ethan," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "What are we looking at?" I pointed to the center screen, where a complex visualization of transaction nodes was pulsing. "We are looking at the anatomy of a theft. A very large, very clumsy theft. I had spent the last 4 hours mapping the data from the USB drive against the public filings of Origin Bio. When you audit a company, you look for discrepancies between what they say they are spending and where the money actually goes. Marcus had been careful, but not careful enough. He was arrogant. He thought no one would look at the research and development budget because RD is a black hole where money goes to die in the name of science. Here, I said, highlighting a cluster of red nodes. Project Chimera. I have never heard of it, Lydia said, frowning. We have projects Alpha, Beta, and Gamma for the new immunotherapy drugs. There is no Chimera. Exactly, I said. Chimera is a ghost. It is a shell project created 6 months ago. The stated purpose in the ledger is next-generation viral vector research. It sounds impressive. It sounds expensive. And that is the point. I typed a command expanding the data. In the last 6 months, Origin Bio has transferred $200 million into Project Chimera's operating budget. That is nearly 40% of the company's liquid reserves. My mother gasped. 200 million? Where did it go? We haven't hired new scientists. We haven't built new labs. It didn't go to labs, I explained, tracing the line on the screen. It went to equipment procurement, specifically to a supplier called Apex Logistics, based in the Cayman Islands. I just ran a cross-reference. Apex Logistics operates out of a post office box in Georgetown. They don't sell microscopes or centrifuges. They sell nothing. He is draining the company, Lydia whispered, her face pale in the monitor's glow. He is gutting it before the sale. It gets worse, I said, my voice tight. He isn't just stealing the cash. He is leveraging the company's credit. He took out a short-term bridge loan for another $50 million last week, using the company's intellectual property as collateral. He poured that into Chimera too. So, if he disappears, the company goes bankrupt, I finished. The creditors will seize the patents. The employees, 3,000 people, will lose their jobs. The Caldwell legacy will be sold for scrap metal to pay off debts that Marcus pocketed. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. The scale of the fraud was massive, but the mechanism was simple. It was a bust-out scheme, classic organized crime tactics applied to a Fortune 500 corporation. But knowing it wasn't enough. I needed to prove where the money went after it hit the Cayman Islands. I need to get into the Apex Logistics accounts, I said. I need to trace the wire transfers from the Cayman Islands to wherever he is hiding it. Likely Switzerland or Dubai. If I can get the final destination account number, I can get the FBI to freeze it. I turned back to the keyboard, ready to brute force my way through the next layer of encryption. I launched a packet sniffer to analyze the traffic between Marcus's private server and the offshore bank. A window popped up, a red box with a padlock icon. Access denied. Multi-factor authentication required. Please enter RS, a token code. I slammed my fist on the desk. Damn it! What? Lydia asked, standing up. I hit the wall, I said, pointing at the blinking cursor. I have his username. I have the password you gave me. But the bank account in the Caymans requires a physical security token. It is a little digital key fob that generates a random 6-digit code every 60 seconds. Without that code, I cannot see the transaction history. I cannot see where the money is going. The RSA token, Lydia said thoughtfully. A small black oval with a little gray screen? Yes, I said. Do you know where it is? He keeps it on his keychain, she said. He never lets it out of his sight. It is with his car keys, his house keys. Then we are dead in the water, I said, slumping in the chair. He is in Hawaii. The token is in his pocket. I cannot hack a physical object that is 3,000 miles away. Lydia closed her eyes, thinking. Wait. He has 2. I looked at her. 2? He lost one last year, she said. He made a huge fuss about it. He ordered a replacement. Then 2 days later, the maid found the original one behind the nightstand. He never reactivated it, but he never threw it away either. He kept it as a backup. "Where is the backup?" I asked, my heart rate spiking. "In the wall safe," she said. "In the master bedroom, behind the painting of the stormy seascape that he hates." "The safe," I repeated. "Do you know the combination?" "It is his birthday," she said with a bitter smile. 081969. He is not a complicated man, Ethan. Just a greedy one. I looked at the clock on the computer. It was 4:15 in the morning. "We have a problem," I said. "The token is in the safe. The safe is in the mansion. The mansion is a fortress. He upgraded the security system last month. Motion sensors, glass break detectors, and cameras covering every inch of the perimeter. If I break a window, the police will be there in 5 minutes." "I have a key," Lydia said. "His key code will override yours," I countered. "He likely revoked your access codes the moment the death certificate was signed. If we use your code, it might trigger a silent alarm." I turned to the third monitor. "I need to see what we are dealing with." I pulled up the login page for the home security provider, Sentinel Shield. Marcus had linked the house system to the company server so he could monitor it remotely. That was his mistake. Anything connected to the internet has a door. You just have to find the loose hinge. I didn't have the admin password for the security system, but I knew the architecture. I ran a script to exploit a known vulnerability in the firmware of the older camera models installed at the back gate. It took 10 minutes of agonizing waiting, the progress bar crawling across the screen. Access granted. The screen flickered, then resolved into a grid of 12 live video feeds. The mansion stood silent in the darkness. The rain had stopped, but the grounds were wet and slick. I saw the front gate, the driveway, the pool area, and the side entrance. It looked deserted. "Okay," I said, studying the layout. "The house is in night mode. That means the perimeter alarm is armed, but the interior motion sensors are likely set to bypass in the master bedroom, so he can walk around at night. If I can get inside without tripping the perimeter, I might be able to get to the safe." "How do you get in without tripping the perimeter?" Lydia asked. "I don't," I said. "I have to loop the feed. I need to record 10 minutes of empty footage, then play it back to the monitoring station while I walk through the front door." It was a risky move. Hollywood makes it look easy, but in reality, syncing a loop without a glitch is a nightmare. One skipped frame, one timestamp mismatch, and the alarm trips. But then my eyes caught something on the fourth monitor, the one tracking Marcus's travel data. An alert flashed red. Flight update. Passenger, Thorne Marcus. Status, changed. I clicked on it. My stomach dropped. "He is not flying to Zurich tomorrow," I said. "He changed his ticket." "What?" Lydia leaned in. "He is on a private charter," I said, reading the manifest. "Tail number November 77 X-ray. It took off from Kahului Airport 2 hours ago. Destination, Boeing Field, Seattle." "He is coming back?" Lydia asked, her voice trembling. "He is landing in 3 hours," I said. 6:30 in the morning. "Why?" she asked. "Why come back early?" "Because of the vote," I realized. The lawyers must have told him. He can't sell the company by proxy. He has to be physically present to sign the dissolution papers. He is coming back for an emergency shareholder meeting at 9 o'clock this morning. I looked at the time. 4:25. "We don't have 24 hours, I said, the adrenaline flooding my system. "We have maybe 4 hours before he walks through that front door. If he gets home and finds me there, it is over. If he signs those papers at 9 o'clock, the money vanishes into the ether, and Origen is dead." "We have to go now," Lydia said, grabbing my arm. "Ethan, we have to get that token." "It is too risky," I said, hesitating. "If I trip the alarm, the police come. If I get arrested, I can't stop the sale. I can't protect you." "If you don't go, he wins," she said firmly. "He takes the money, he kills the company, and he gets away with murder." She was right. The safe option was to wait, to try to fight this in court with the evidence we had. But the evidence was circumstantial. Without the bank records from the RSA token, we couldn't prove where the money went. We couldn't prove the theft. We could only prove mismanagement. Marcus would walk away with a golden parachute while the company burned. "Okay," I said. "I am going in." I turned back to the security feeds to plan my route. I needed to identify the blind spots. I needed to see if there were any guards. I scanned the cameras one by one. Driveway, clear. Pool, clear. Back patio, clear. Then I checked the interior cameras. Living room, clear. Kitchen, clear. Hallway. I froze. "What is it?" Lydia asked, sensing the change in my posture. "Someone is in the house," I whispered. On the screen in the grainy black and white night vision of the upstairs hallway camera, a figure was moving. It wasn't a burglar. They weren't moving with stealth. They were moving with purpose. The figure walked under the camera, and the infrared light illuminated their face for a split second. It was a woman. Long blonde hair tied back in a messy bun. She was wearing a silk robe, my mother's silk robe. "Elena!" I hissed. "She came back?" Lydia asked, staring at the screen in disbelief. "She must have taken a commercial flight earlier," I said. She beat him back. "But why?" We watched as Elena moved down the hallway. She wasn't going to the master bedroom. She was heading to the guest wing, to the room that Lydia used as a private study. She was carrying a large black trash bag. "She is scrubbing the house," I realized. "She is getting rid of your things. She is erasing you before Marcus gets back." We watched as she kicked open the door to the study. Through the open door, we could see her frantically pulling books off the shelves, sweeping papers into the trash bag. She wasn't just cleaning. She was searching. "She is looking for something," Lydia said. "Something she thinks I hid." "This complicates everything," I said, my mind racing. "I can't loop the cameras if there is someone moving inside the house. The motion sensors will conflict with the loop. The system will throw an error." "So you can't go in?" "I can't go in quietly," I corrected. "If I go in, she will hear me. If she hears me, she calls Marcus, or the police." I looked at the screen at the woman who had helped plot my mother's murder, now tearing apart her sanctuary. I looked at the time, 4:30. Marcus lands in 2 hours. He will be at the house by 7. I had a window of 2.5 hours. "I have to change the plan," I said, standing up and grabbing my car keys. "I am not going to sneak past her. I am going to use her." "What do you mean?" "Elena is paranoid," I said, pulling on my coat. "She knows they committed a crime. She is jittery. I saw it in the emails. She is terrified that Marcus is going to cut her out." I turned to my mother. "You stay here. You keep monitoring the flight. If that plane lands early, you text me red light. Otherwise, I am going to walk into that house, and I am going to make Elena Rostova give me exactly what I need." "Ethan, she is dangerous," Lydia warned. "She is not just a lawyer. She carries a gun in her purse. I have seen it." "Good," I said, checking my pockets to make sure I had the burner phone and the flashlight. "Because I am bringing a ghost with me." I looked at the security feed one last time. Elena was now in the master bedroom approaching the painting that hid the safe. She paused, looking over her shoulder, her face twisted in a mask of anxiety. She didn't know the combination. She was trying to guess it. "Perfect," I whispered. I headed for the door. The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time to enter the lion's den. And I was bringing the one thing they weren't expecting: the truth. The service entrance to the lakeside estate was concealed behind a trellis of overgrown ivy. It was a detail my father had insisted on, a way for the gardening staff to enter, without disrupting the aesthetic of the main facade. Now, it was my only way into the life I had left behind. I punched the 4-digit code into the keypad. It was the year my parents were married. Marcus had changed the front gate codes and the main alarm, but he had forgotten this keypad existed. He never cared about the staff or how they moved through the property. To him, The house cleaned itself. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the night. I froze, counting to 10, waiting for a siren or a shout. But there was only the rhythmic lapping of Lake Washington against the private dock and the distant hum of the pool filter. I slipped inside, closing the door softly behind me. The air in the mudroom was stale. It smelled of cardboard and packing tape. I stepped into the main hallway, moving on the balls of my feet, my breathing shallow and controlled. I had grown up in these halls. I knew which floorboards creaked. I knew that the third step on the servants' staircase groaned if you put weight on the center. I knew the acoustics of the high ceilings. But as I moved deeper into the house, I realized this was no longer the home I knew. It had been sanitized. The hallway, once lined with my mother's collection of impressionist landscapes, warm, vibrant scenes of French countrysides and bustling markets, was now barren. In their place hung massive, stark canvases of abstract geometric shapes in shades of black-gray and blood-red. They were cold, imposing, and devoid of soul. They were Marcus. I reached the foyer. The grandfather clock that had ticked away the seconds of my childhood was gone, replaced by a chrome sculpture that looked like a twisted spine. And everywhere I looked, there were boxes. Stacks of brown cardboard boxes lined the walls, each one labeled in hasty black marker. Kitchen, donate. Library, trash. Bedroom, storage. I stopped by a box near the coat closet. The flap was open. Inside, I saw my mother's favorite cashmere shawls crumpled and shoved in with no care, resting on top of a broken picture frame containing a photo of me at my college graduation. The glass was shattered over my smiling face. A surge of rage, hot and blinding, blurred my vision. My hands curled into fists so tight, my knuckles turned white. This was not just a renovation. This was an erasure. Marcus and Elena were not just stealing the money. They were scrubbing Lydia Caldwell from the face of the earth. They were treating her life, her memories, her very essence as debris, to be swept away, to make room for their new regime. I wanted to kick the box over. I wanted to scream. But then a sound cut through the red haze of my anger. Click, clack, click, clack. The sharp staccato sound of high heels on marble flooring. I threw myself behind a pillar, just as a shadow elongated across the foyer floor. Elena Rostova walked into view. She was wearing my mother's silk robe. The sight of it made my stomach turn. It was a pale blue garment my father had bought for Mom in Paris 30 years ago. To my mother, it had looked elegant. On Elena, with the sash tied too tight and the hem dragging slightly, it looked like a stolen costume. She was holding a phone to her ear, her other hand gripping a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid. She was pacing, her movements jerky and agitated. "I do not care what the Swiss bankers said, Marcus," she hissed into the phone. Her voice was sharp, echoing off the marble. "You land in 3 hours. I want the transfer initiated the moment you sign those papers." She paused, listening to his reply. I could not hear Marcus, but I could imagine his smooth, placating tone. It clearly wasn't working. "Don't you dare give me that corporate speech," she snapped, taking a furious swig of her drink. "We had a deal, 40%. That was the price for my silence. That was the price for the legal loopholes. And that was the price for the tea." I stopped breathing. The tea. My mother drank herbal tea every night before bed. It was her ritual. "I mixed it, Marcus," Elena continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that carried perfectly in the empty house. "I put the drops in the chamomile. I watched her drink it. I watched her eyes get heavy. I did the dirty work while you sat in the study pretending to work. So do not tell me about liquidity issues. If I do not see $180 million in my account by noon tomorrow, I am sending the unburnt packet to the FBI." She was confessing. She was laying it all out. And I didn't have a recording device running. My burner phone was in my pocket, but retrieving it would make noise. I had to rely on my memory. I had to be the witness. "Fine," she said, her tone shifting to a smug satisfaction. "See you at 7. And Marcus, don't be late. The grieving widow act only works if you actually show up." She hung up the phone and tossed it onto the sofa. She stood there for a moment looking around the foyer. She ran a hand over the chrome sculpture, her nails clicking against the metal. Then she turned and headed toward the kitchen, likely to refill her drink. This was my chance. I waited until her footsteps faded onto the kitchen tiles. Then I moved. I sprinted silently across the foyer and up the main staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time, skipping the creaky ones from muscle memory. I reached the landing and turned left toward the master suite. The door was open. I slipped inside. The room was unrecognizable. My parents' bed, a 4-poster antique oak frame, was gone. In its place was a low, sleek black leather platform bed. The floral curtains were replaced by automatic blackout shades. It looked like a hotel room in Vegas, not a home in Seattle. I didn't have time to mourn the furniture. I went straight to the fireplace on the far wall. Above it hung the painting Lydia had mentioned, a stormy seascape. It was a dark, brooding oil painting that Marcus had bought at an auction last year, solely because it was expensive. I gripped the frame and pulled. It swung outward on hidden hinges. The wall safe was revealed. The keypad glowed a faint blue in the darkness. I took a breath. 0, 8, 1, 9, 6, 9. I typed the numbers. Beep. Click. The heavy steel door popped open. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached inside my fingers, searching for the small plastic oval of the RSA token. My hand met empty air. I pulled out my flashlight, shielding the beam with my fingers, so only a sliver of light escaped. I shone it into the safe. It was empty. Dust. A few rubber bands. A velvet jewelry box that was also empty. But no token, no hard drives, no cash. No. "Damn it," I whispered. He had cleaned it out. Of course he had. He was going to Switzerland. Why would he leave the key to his fortune behind? The backup token wasn't a backup anymore. It was likely in his pocket, alongside the primary one, or he had destroyed it before leaving for Hawaii. I felt a wave of despair. Without that token, we couldn't track the money. We couldn't prove where the $200 million had gone. I began to close the safe door, my mind racing for a plan B. As the door swung shut, the sliver of my flashlight beam caught something wedged in the back corner of the safe, stuck between the hinge and the wall. It wasn't the token. It was a small, black moleskin notebook. I reached in and pried it loose. It was thin, pocket-sized. I opened it. It wasn't a ledger. It was a logbook. The pages were filled with handwritten coordinates. 47 degrees north, 122 degrees west. Container 77 Bravo, Port of Tacoma. Shipment ID, a G-opioid-9. I flipped the page. Distribution node, Spokane, Warehouse 4. Contact, the surgeon. My eyes widened. This wasn't about the embezzlement. This was the side hustle. Lydia had said he was laundering money for cartels, but she didn't know the mechanism. This was it. Marcus wasn't just moving digital money. He was moving physical product using Origen's logistics network. He was shipping opioids under the guise of pharmaceutical supplies. This was hard evidence. This was a federal crime that carried a life sentence. I pulled out my burner phone. I didn't have time to read it all. I set the notebook on the mantelpiece and started snapping photos of every page. Click, flip, click, flip. I was on the last page when I heard it. The footsteps were back, and they were close. I shoved the notebook back into my pocket. I swung the painting shut. It clicked into place just as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. She was coming here. I looked around the room. The blackout shades were drawn. I couldn't go out the window. The bathroom was too far. The closet was a trap. If she went in to change, I would be cornered. There was only one option. In the corner of the room, pushed against the wall, as if it were an afterthought, was an old mahogany desk. It was my father's desk. Marcus hadn't thrown it out yet, probably because it was too heavy to move without movers. I dropped to the floor and scrambled under the desk, curling my 6'2" frame into a tight ball in the knee hole. I pulled my legs in, pressing my back against the wood that smelled faintly of the lemon polish my mother used to use. The door to the bedroom pushed open. I held my breath. I pinched my nose to stop the wheezing sound of my own adrenaline. Elena walked in. I could see her feet. She had kicked off her heels. She was barefoot now. She walked straight to the desk. My heart stopped. If she sat down, if she pulled the chair in, her legs would brush against mine. I would be discovered. And she had a gun in her purse. She stopped inches from the desk. I could see her painted toenails. I could see the hem of my mother's blue robe. She didn't sit. She reached for something on top of the desk. I heard the clink of glass against a coaster. She had left her bottle here earlier. She poured a drink. The sound of liquid splashing into a glass was agonizingly loud. Then she laughed. It was a low, throaty chuckle. She sat down on the edge of the desk directly above my head. The wood creaked under her weight. "Here is to you, Lydia," she said, raising her glass to the empty room. "You stupid, naive cow." I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. The insult hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. "You really thought he loved you," she continued, her voice dripping with mockery. "He couldn't stand the smell of you. He used to come to my apartment afterward and take a 2-hour shower just to wash the old money off his skin." She kicked her legs, playfully, her heel banging against the wood of the desk, inches from my face. Thud, thud, thud. "But don't worry," she cooed. "We will spend your money better than you ever did. No more charities for stray cats. We are going to buy an island. A real island. And I am going to burn this ugly robe the second the wire hits." She slid off the desk. "Goodbye, Lydia," she whispered. She grabbed the bottle and walked out of the room, humming a tune. The door did not close behind her. I stayed under the desk for a full 2 minutes, shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so pure, so concentrated, that it felt like I had swallowed a star. She was not just a thief. She was a ghoul. She was feasting on the corpse of a woman who had never shown her anything but kindness. I crawled out from under the desk. My limbs were stiff. I checked the hallway. Empty. I needed to get out. I had the photos of the notebook. I had the confession. I had enough to bury them. I moved to the window, disabled the latch with a pocket knife, and slid it open. The cool night air hit my face, washing away the stench of Elena's perfume. We were on the second floor, but there was a trellis of wisteria that ran down the side of the house. I had climbed it 100 times as a teenager when I snuck out to meet friends. I climbed out, finding the footholds in the thick vines. I descended quickly, my shoes scuffing against the brick. I hit the grass and crouched, scanning the yard. Clear. I ran toward the side gate, keeping low behind the hedges. I slipped through the gap in the fence and sprinted down the driveway toward the road where I had parked my car a quarter-mile away in a cul-de-sac. I reached my car, gasping for air. I fumbled for my keys, unlocked the door, and threw myself into the driver's seat. I was safe. I had done it. I started the engine and turned on the headlights. The beams cut through the darkness, illuminating the street ahead. And then I saw it. Parked just 50 feet ahead of me, facing my direction, was a silver Porsche Cayenne. Elena's car. I hadn't noticed it when I arrived because the streetlights were out on this block. But now, in the glare of my headlights, I saw a tiny blinking red light mounted on her windshield. A dashboard camera. Specifically, a Sentinel 360. The kind that has motion-activated parking mode. The sensor had been triggered when I ran past it. It had been triggered when I started my car. I stared at the blinking red eye. It had recorded everything. It had recorded my face. It had recorded my license plate. Elena didn't know I was there yet. But the moment she got in her car to leave, or the moment her phone synced with the cloud storage of the camera, she would get a notification. Motion detected. She would see me. She would see that the dead woman's son was not grieving at home, but was lurking outside her safe house at 4 in the morning. I slammed the car into gear and peeled away the tires screeching on the asphalt. The element of surprise was gone. The clock hadn't just ticked down. It had shattered. I grabbed my burner phone and dialed the number for the safe house. "Mom," I said the moment she picked up. "Pack the equipment. We are burned. They are going to know." I drove back to the university district with the sunrise burning in my rearview mirror. My hands were shaking against the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. I had escaped the mansion, but the image of that blinking red camera eye on Elena's dashboard was seared into my retinas. They knew. Or they would know very soon. The element of surprise, our only true weapon, was dissolving like mist in the morning sun. When I burst through the door of the safe house, Lydia was pacing the small room, a half-packed duffel bag at her feet. She looked up, her face etched with a mixture of hope and terror. "Did you get it?" she asked. "Did you get the token?" "No," I said, locking the door behind me and throwing the bolt. The safe was empty. He cleaned it out. Lydia sank onto the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumping. "Then it is over. Without the token, we cannot trace the wire transfers. We cannot prove he stole the money." "It is not over," I said, pulling my burner phone from my pocket. "I found something better than a bank key. I found the ledger." I plugged the phone into the air-gapped laptop and initiated the transfer. The photos I had taken of the black moleskin notebook appeared on the monitor's high resolution and stark against the dark background. "What is this?" Lydia asked, squinting at the screen. "Marcus is old school," I said, zooming in on the first page. "He trusts paper more than the cloud." He wrote down coordinates. I opened a mapping software, typing in the numbers from the first page. 47 degrees north, 122 degrees west. "Is it a meeting spot?" Lydia asked. "A safe house?" "No," I said as the map resolved. "It is an industrial park in Kent, about 20 miles south of here. Specifically a facility called Glacier Logistics." I typed in the second set of coordinates. "Spokane, another warehouse district." I typed the third. "Portland, a distribution hub." I sat back, staring at the pattern of red pins dropping onto the map of the Pacific Northwest. "These aren't random locations. It is a supply chain." "A supply chain for what?" Lydia asked. "Origen uses certified medical couriers. We don't use random warehouses in the suburbs." "That is what I intend to find out," I said. I stood up and grabbed my coat. "I am going to Kent." "I am coming with you," Lydia said, reaching for her shoes. "No," I said firmly. "You are legally dead, Mom. If you are seen, the game ends before we can play it. Stay here. Monitor the flight tracker. If Marcus lands early, you call me. If Elena moves her car, you call me." I left her there, surrounded by the glow of the monitors, and ran back down to my car. The drive to Kent was a blur of concrete and gray sky. The morning traffic was thick, a river of commuters, heading to jobs they hated completely, unaware that a $450 million conspiracy was unspooling in the lane next to them. I reached the industrial park at 8 in the morning. It was a desolate place, a maze of corrugated metal buildings and barbed wire fences. Glacier Logistics was at the end of a cul-de-sac. It looked abandoned. There were no cars in the lot, no security guard in the booth. Just a massive windowless block of concrete, with a loading dock around the back. I parked my car 2 blocks away and approached on foot. I walked along the perimeter fence until I found a section where the chain link had been cut and poorly repaired. I squeezed through. The silence was heavy. The only sound was the low, mechanical hum of massive cooling units on the roof. This was a cold storage facility. I circled to the back. The loading bay doors were rolled down and locked, but there was a side door, a standard metal fire exit. I checked the handle. Locked. I pulled out a set of lockpicks I kept in my glove box, a souvenir from a security penetration test I had conducted for a bank 3 years ago. I was rusty, but the lock was cheap, a standard pin tumbler. It took me 45 seconds to feel the tension wrench give. Click. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The cold hit me instantly. It was a dry, biting freeze that went straight through my suit jacket. The air smelled of cardboard dust and something chemical, acrid and faint. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing rows of floor-to-ceiling metal shelving. They were stacked high with wooden pallets, each one wrapped in layers of clear plastic shrink wrap. I walked down the central aisle, my footsteps echoing on the concrete. I checked the labels on the boxes. Origin Bio, saline solution. Origin Bio, pediatric antibiotics. Origin Bio, insulin syringes. It looked legitimate. These were standard medical supplies. But something was wrong. Why were they here? Origin had a state-of-the-art climate-controlled warehouse in downtown Seattle. Why pay for a third-party storage unit in the middle of nowhere? I pulled a pocket knife from my belt and sliced into the plastic wrap of a pallet labeled saline solution. I pulled out a box. It was sealed with the official Origin holographic tape. I cut the tape and opened the flap. Inside were rows of glass vials filled with clear liquid. I held one up to the light. The label read, sodium chloride 0.9%. I shook it. The viscosity was right. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Marcus was just stealing inventory to sell on the gray market to clinics in developing countries. It was a common scam, but it wouldn't generate the kind of cash he needed. Then I noticed the pallet next to it. It was labeled Origin Bio, experimental viral vector, Lot 49. Project Chimera, I whispered. This was it. The Ghost Project. I slashed the plastic. I pulled down a box. It was heavier than the saline. Much heavier. I cut the tape. There were no vials inside. Instead, the box was packed tight with vacuum-sealed foil bags. There were no labels on the bags. Just a black stamp of a scorpion on each one. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what this was. I had audited a pharmaceutical company in Ohio that had been shut down for this. I took one of the bags and made a small incision. A fine white powder spilled out onto my palm. I didn't need a chemical test to know what I was holding. Fentanyl. Or perhaps one of the new synthetic analogs that were 50 times stronger. I looked up at the shelves. There were 10 pallets of this viral vector. Each pallet held 60 boxes. Each box held 10 bags. I did the mental math, the numbers clicking into place with terrifying speed. If this was pure fentanyl, a single kilogram was worth roughly $30,000 wholesale. But on the street, cut and pressed into pills, the value skyrocketed. There were easily 2,000 kilograms here. $85 million! I breathed the steam from my breath, clouding in the freezing air. This wasn't embezzlement. This wasn't corporate fraud. Marcus Thorne wasn't just stealing from the company. He was using Origin Bio's logistics network, its trucks, its shipping containers, and its customs clearance priority to smuggle industrial-scale quantities of opioids into the country. He wasn't washing money for himself. He was the washing machine for a cartel. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The sudden death of my mother. The rush to sell the company. The one-way ticket to Switzerland. It wasn't just greed. It was fear. Marcus had likely lost a shipment. Or he had gotten too deep and owed money to people who didn't send lawyers. They sent hitmen. He needed to liquidate the company to pay a debt. Or he needed to run before the DEA connected the dots. If he sold Origin to Ziegler Pharmaceuticals on Monday, the new owners would take possession of the inventory. They would find this warehouse. They would call the feds. And Marcus would be long gone, leaving the Caldwell legacy to take the fall for the largest drug bust in Washington state history. My mother wasn't just the victim of a greedy husband. She was the fall guy for a narco-terrorist operation. I felt a vibration in my pocket. My burner phone. I pulled it out. A text from Lydia. Flight landed. He is in the car, heading to the office. I looked at the powder on my hand. I wiped it on my pants, my hands trembling. This changed the rules of engagement. We weren't fighting a civil case anymore. If I took this to a civil court, Marcus would bond out and disappear, or worse, the cartel would silence us before we could testify. I needed the nuclear option. I took photos. I photographed the boxes, the scorpion stamps, the powder, the Origen lot numbers that matched the fake Project Chimera invoices. Then I ran. I sprinted out of the warehouse, locking the door behind me with shaking hands. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I locked the doors and slumped low in the seat. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. It rang 3 times. "Miller," a gruff voice answered. "Agent Miller," I said, my voice tight. "It is Ethan Caldwell, from the Veritas audit." There was a pause. "Ethan, it has been a while. I heard about your mother. I am sorry." "She was murdered, Miller," I said. "But that is not why I am calling. Ethan, if this is a grief thing—" "It is not a grief thing," I snapped. "It is an $85 million opioid shipment sitting in a warehouse in Kent, under my family's corporate name." The line went silent. I could hear Miller breathing. "Start talking," Miller said, his tone shifting instantly from condolence to command. "My stepfather, Marcus Thorne. He is using Origen Bio as a front. I have the location. I have the product. I have the ledger linking the shipment to his personal shell accounts." "You have seen the product?" Miller asked. "I am holding the residue on my hands right now," I said. "Synthetic opioids, pallets of it, disguised as vaccine research." "Don't move," Miller said. "Tell me exactly where you are. I am sending a team." "No team," I said. "Not yet. If you raid the warehouse now, you get the drugs, but Marcus walks. He will claim he didn't know. He will claim it was a rogue employee. He is selling the company in 24 hours, Miller. Once he signs those papers, he washes his hands of the liability." "What do you want, Ethan?" "I want him in cuffs," I said. "For murder. For trafficking. For everything. I don't want a plea deal. I want federal prison." "Then I need a link," Miller said. "Finding drugs in a company warehouse isn't enough to pin it on the CEO. I need a signature. I need a communication. I need hard evidence that Marcus Thorne ordered that specific shipment." "I have his notebook," I said. "Handwritten coordinates." "Circumstantial," Miller countered. "A defense attorney will say he was noting down facility locations for a safety inspection. It is weak, Ethan." "I have a confession," I lied. "From his mistress." "Recorded?" "Witnessed," I said. "By me." "Hearsay," Miller groaned. "Ethan, you know how this works. You are an auditor. You need the paper trail. I need something that connects Marcus Thorne to that warehouse that cannot be explained away by incompetence or delegation. I need the smoking gun." I looked at the warehouse in the rearview mirror. I thought about the safe, the missing token, the rushed flight back. "He is meeting the shareholders at 9 o'clock, I said. "He has to sign the merger documents. He has to verify the assets." "So?" "So," I said, a plan forming in the chaotic static of my mind. "I am going to make him sign for the drugs." "Ethan, do not do anything stupid," Miller warned. "Do not go into that meeting." "I have to," I said. "It is the only way to get his fingerprints on the crime. If you go in there and he really is cartel connected, you are walking into a kill zone," Miller said. "These people don't sue, Ethan. They execute." "He killed my mother," I said, my voice cold and steady. "He already started the war. I am just finishing it." "Ethan!" I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the rain start to fall again, tapping against the roof of the car. It was a rhythmic drumming sound, like a funeral march. I started the engine. I wasn't going back to the safe house. I was going to the one place Marcus thought he was safe. I was going to the boardroom. But first, I needed to pick up my client. I dialed Lydia. "Put on your suit, Mom," I said. "We have a meeting to attend." The glow of the television screen was the only source of light in the safe house. It bathed my mother's face in a flickering bluish hue, that made her look like the ghost she was pretending to be. We sat side by side on the narrow bed, watching the live broadcast from the lobby of the Origen Bio headquarters. Marcus Thorne stood at the podium. He looked impeccable yet devastated. He was wearing a black suit that cost more than most people's annual salary, but he had forgone the tie, leaving his collar open to suggest a man too consumed by grief to care about formalities. His eyes were red-rimmed, a detail likely achieved with an onion or a dash of hot sauce right before stepping onto the stage. "My wife Lydia was a visionary," Marcus said into the microphone, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "She believed in a world without pain, and in her honor to secure the future of the research she loved, I have made the difficult decision to merge Origen Bio with Ziegler Pharmaceuticals." He paused, looking down at the podium as if gathering his strength. The camera flashes popped like strobes. "The sale price of $4.2 billion will not go to line the pockets of shareholders," he lied, looking straight into the camera. "It will go toward establishing the Lydia Caldwell Foundation. I will donate my entire portion of the proceeds to charity. It is what she would have wanted." "Liar," Lydia whispered beside me. Her voice was not angry. It was cold. It was the sound of a judge delivering a verdict. "He is selling it to cover the drug debt. He is selling my father's legacy to save his own skin." "He is good," I admitted, watching the reporters nod in sympathy. "The narrative is perfect. The grieving widower making a selfless sacrifice. If we attack him publicly now, we look like monsters." "Then we don't attack him publicly," Lydia said, turning her gaze from the screen to me. "We attack him privately. We make him doubt his own mind. We make him paranoid. And when he is paranoid, he will turn on the only ally he has left." She pointed to the laptop. "Is the remote access still active?" I checked the connection. "The security system update is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Until then, your administrative credentials for the smart home system are still valid. He revoked your key codes, but he forgot that the master user account is linked to your biometric profile, which is stored locally on the server." "Good," Lydia said, a cruel smile touching her lips. "He wants to play the grieving husband. Let's give him a haunting." The plan was psychological warfare, gaslighting. We were going to use the very technology Marcus loved, the automated, connected, soulless efficiency of his mansion, against him. We were going to turn the house into a pressure cooker and weld the lid shut. We waited until nightfall. On the monitors, we watched the live feeds. Marcus and Elena had returned to the lakeside estate around 8 in the evening. The atmosphere between them was already toxic. They sat in the living room, separated by a vast expanse of white leather sofa. Marcus was drinking scotch, pacing back and forth. Elena was on her phone, likely checking her offshore accounts, her leg bouncing nervously. "He is drinking heavily," I noted. "That makes him vulnerable to suggestion." "Let's begin," Lydia said. She reached over and typed a command into the console. In the mansion, the thermostat in the master bedroom, which was currently set to a comfortable 72 degrees, silently dropped to 55 degrees. We watched on the camera as Marcus shivered. He looked at the window, checking if it was open. It was closed. He walked over to the thermostat control panel on the wall. He jabbed at it, frowning. "It says 72, he muttered, his voice, picked up by the room's microphone. "Why is it freezing in here?" Elena didn't look up. "You are just stressed, Marcus. Sit down." "I am not stressed," he snapped. "It is cold. Can't you feel it?" "It feels fine to me," Elena said, though she pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. She was gaslighting him too, instinctively. "Phase 2, I said. The audio. Lydia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "He hates this song. I used to play it on the piano on Sunday mornings. He said it was depressing." She hit enter. The mansion's integrated sound system, which had speakers hidden in the ceilings of every room, crackled to life. It wasn't loud. It was soft, barely a whisper of sound. The opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor drifted through the house. On the screen, Marcus froze. The glass of scotch stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked around wildly. "Did you hear that?" he demanded. "Hear what?" Elena asked, looking up this time. "The piano," Marcus said, his voice rising in pitch. "Who turned on the audio system?" "Nobody touched the system, Marcus," Elena said, standing up. "It is off." "I can hear it," he shouted. "It is her song. It is that damn song she always played." He ran to the wall panel and started hitting buttons. But I had locked out the manual controls. The music continued mournful and slow, seeping into the room like smoke. "Stop it!" Marcus yelled at the ceiling. "Alexa, Siri, whatever you are, stop." The music did not stop. In fact, I increased the volume by 10%, just enough to be undeniable. Elena looked unsettled now. She walked over to the main console in the hallway. "It says the system is offline," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Marcus, there is no music playing according to the computer." "Then why am I hearing it?" Marcus roared. He threw his glass against the fireplace. It shattered the sound, sharp and violent. "Is someone in the house? Is it that son of hers, Ethan?" He pulled a handgun from the drawer of the side table, a Glock 9mm. He started moving toward the hallway. "Wait," Lydia said to me. Now the scent. The house was equipped with a high-end HVAC aromatherapy system designed to pump scents like ocean breeze or cedar into the rooms. Lydia accessed the cartridge menu. There was one cartridge labeled Custom Wedding Day. She activated it. Within seconds, the master bedroom and the hallway would be flooded with the heavy, cloying scent of white gardenias. It was the perfume Lydia had worn for 40 years. It was the scent that clung to her clothes, her pillows, and her hair. We watched Marcus stop in the hallway. He sniffed the air. His face went pale, draining of all color. He backed up, hitting the wall. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Elena asked, coming up behind him. Then she smelled it too. She covered her nose and mouth with her hand. "Oh my God!" "It is her," Marcus stammered, his eyes wide and unseeing. "She is here. She is in the house." "She is dead, Marcus!" Elena shrieked, grabbing his arm. "We killed her. We saw the body." "Then explain the smell," Marcus screamed, shoving her away. "Explain the music. She knows. She knows we are selling the company tomorrow. She has come back." "It is a malfunction," Elena insisted, though she looked terrified. "It is the electronics, or it is a hacker." "It is Ethan." "Ethan is an accountant," Marcus spat. "He pushes paper. He doesn't hack smart homes." He was unraveling. The guilt, the alcohol, and the pressure of the impending drug deal were fracturing his mind. He was a narcissist, and narcissists are fragile when they lose control of their environment. "Now," I said. The kill shot. I opened the email client. I had prepared a message from an anonymous encrypted server. The subject line was blank. I typed the body of the email. It was short. It was specific. It was designed to trigger the one thing Marcus trusted least, his partner in crime. Message: "I know what you did with the blue vial. I know about the drops in the chamomile tea. I have the recording of you giving the order. Prepare to transfer 40% of the sale price to the following account, or the recording goes to the FBI." I hit send. On the screen, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it at first, still staring at the ceiling, listening to the piano music that was now looping the same 4 bars over and over again. The phone buzzed again. And again. I was spamming the notification. He pulled it out with a growl of frustration. He unlocked the screen. I watched his face. I saw the moment he read the words, blue vial. I saw the moment he read chamomile tea. His eyes narrowed. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, murderous rage. He looked up from the phone and locked eyes with Elena. "You traitorous bitch," he whispered. Elena took a step back. "What?" What are you talking about? You are the only one, Marcus said, walking toward her slowly, the gun hanging loosely in his hand. You are the only one who knew about the blue vial. I never wrote that down. I never told a soul. Only you knew the color. I didn't tell anyone, Elena cried, backing into the living room. You want 40%? Marcus shouted, holding up the phone. You just sent me a blackmail demand? You think you can squeeze me the night before the sale? I didn't send anything, Elena screamed. Marcus, you are drunk. You are paranoid. Let me see the phone. Don't lie to me, Marcus lunged at her. He grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall. The painting on the wall rattled. Elena clawed at his hands, gasping for air. I made you, Marcus spat in her face. You were a nothing lawyer filing patent applications until I pulled you up. I gave you the world. And this is how you repay me? By trying to extort me with your own crime? Marcus, please, Elena choked out. He threw her to the floor. She scrambled backward, knocking over a vase. Get out, Marcus said, pointing the gun at her chest. Marcus, listen to me. Get out, he screamed, his voice breaking. Get out of my house before I put a bullet in your head and tell the police you were an intruder. Elena didn't argue. She saw the look in his eyes, the look of a cornered animal that had decided to bite. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed her purse from the sofa, and ran for the front door. If I see you again, Marcus yelled after her, I will kill you myself. The front door slammed. Marcus stood alone in the living room. The piano music was still playing. The smell of gardenias was still thick in the air. He looked around, spinning in a circle, pointing the gun at the shadows. I am not afraid of ghosts, he screamed at the empty room. Then he collapsed onto the sofa and poured himself another drink straight from the bottle. He is broken, Lydia said softly. He will be a wreck at the meeting tomorrow. But we are not done, I said. We just cut off the limb. Now we need the limb to talk. I picked up the burner phone. I sat back and waited. Elena Rostova was smart. She was a survivor. She was currently standing in the driveway of a mansion she had been kicked out of, knowing that her lover was a psychopath who was about to frame her, or kill her. She knew too much, and now she had zero leverage. She needed a lifeline. The phone in my hand vibrated. Unknown number. I looked at Lydia. She nodded. I answered the call. I didn't say a word. I just listened. There was silence on the other end for a moment, just the sound of heavy breathing and the wind blowing through the trees. I know who this is. Elena's voice came through shaky and tearful. You are the one who was at the house last night. You are the one driving the black sedan. I remained silent. He is going to kill me, she sobbed. He thinks I betrayed him. He is insane. He is not insane, Elena, I said, using a voice modulator that deepened my tone to a metallic growl. He is just tying up loose ends. And you are a loose end. I have insurance, she stammered. I have recordings. I have the original will. The real one. My grip on the phone tightened. The real will. The one Marcus had supposedly destroyed. What do you want? I asked. I want out, she said. I want immunity. I want a flight to a country where he cannot find me. And I want to see him burn. Meet me at the parking garage on 4th and Pike, I said. Level D. You have 20 minutes. If you are late, the deal is off. Who are you? She asked. I am the auditor, I said. I hung up the phone. I stood up and adjusted my jacket. She has the original will, Mom. If we have that, we prove the fraud. We prove the forgery. That combined with the drugs puts him away for life. Lydia stood up too. She walked over to the mirror and looked at herself. She smoothed down her short dyed hair. Go get her, Ethan, she said. I have one more preparation to make for tomorrow. What are you doing? I am going to write a speech, she said, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. If I am coming back from the dead, I better have something memorable to say. I nodded, and headed for the door. The trap had snapped shut. The rats were turning on each other. And tomorrow morning in the sterile, glass-walled boardroom of Aura Gen Bio, Marcus Thorne was going to learn that some stains cannot be washed away, no matter how much money you throw at them. The concrete lungs of the underground parking garage on 4th and Pike breathed out a damp, gasoline-scented chill. It was 2 in the morning. The city above was asleep, but down here, the fluorescent lights hummed with a sickly, flickering yellow agitation. Shadows stretched long and distorted between the concrete pillars. I leaned against a structural column in the darkest corner of Level D. I was no longer wearing the suit of a forensic auditor. I was dressed in black cargo pants and a dark tactical jacket. Over my face, I wore a hard plastic ballistic mask, matte black featureless, save for the eye slits. It was theatrical, yes, but necessary. Elena Rostova knew my face. She knew my voice. If she realized she was dealing with Ethan Caldwell, the weak stepson, she might try to leverage her guilt against my grief. I needed to be an entity she feared. I needed to be the consequences of her actions, made flesh. A silver Porsche Cayenne swept down the ramp, its headlights cutting through the gloom like searchlights. It moved too fast, tires squealing on the smooth concrete as it took the corner. It came to a jerking halt 3 spaces away from me. The engine died. The door opened. Elena stepped out. She looked like a ruin of the woman who had sipped cocktails in Hawaii 24 hours ago. Her blonde hair was matted, her makeup smeared across her cheeks in dark streaks of mascara. She was clutching a designer handbag to her chest like a shield. She spun around, her eyes darting into the shadows. "I am here!" she shouted. Her voice echoed thin and brittle against the concrete walls. "Show yourself!" I stepped out from behind the pillar. I did not rush. I walked with a slow, deliberate cadence. She gasped and took a step back, hitting the side of her car. "Who are you?" I pressed the button on the voice modulator, strapped to my throat. "I am the auditor," the synthesized voice rasped out. It sounded metallic, deep, and utterly inhuman. "I want to see your face," she demanded, though her shaking hands betrayed her bravado. "You are in no position to make demands, Elena," the mechanical voice replied. "You are a fugitive. Marcus has locked you out of the accounts. He has threatened your life. I am the only door left open." She swallowed hard, looking around for a trap. "Did you bring the immunity agreement? The flight details?" "Evidence first," I said. She hesitated. Her knuckles were white around the strap of her bag. She was weighing her options, calculating the risk. But she was a rat on a sinking ship, and the water was already at her neck. "If I give you this," she said, her voice trembling, "you swear you can get me out? He has connections. He knows people in the cartels." "The people I work for are the only ones the cartels fear," I lied. "Give me the drive." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. It was old school, not a smartphone. Smart. Phones can be hacked remotely. Offline storage cannot. "He made me record everything," she whispered, staring at the device. "He said it was for insurance in case things went wrong with the merger. He wanted to prove that the board authorized certain risks. But he didn't know I kept it running during the private calls." She threw the recorder to me. I caught it with a gloved hand. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. The background hum of the mansion's air conditioning was audible. "It has to be tonight, Elena." That was Marcus. His voice was impatient, slurring slightly. "The new will is ready. But if she wakes up tomorrow and checks the stock transfer ledger, she will see the Chimera withdrawals." "Marcus' poison is messy," Elena's voice replied on the tape. "Just stage an accident on the stairs." "No," Marcus snapped. "She has osteoporosis. An accident triggers an autopsy. A cardiac arrest in her sleep? That is natural causes. Use the tetrodotoxin. Put it in the tea. The chamomile. She drinks it every night at 10. And if she tastes it? It is tasteless. Just do it. Do you want the 40 million or not?" I stopped the recording. The silence in the garage was deafening. I felt a cold fire burning in my chest. Hearing the casual transactional way they discussed ending my mother's life for $40 million, was different from knowing it. It made the air in my lungs feel heavy. "Is it enough?" Elena asked. She was watching the mask, trying to read an expression that didn't exist. "It is a start," I said. "Where is the money going, Elena?" "Cayman Islands," she said quickly. "Bank of Georgetown. But that is just a pass-through. The final destination is a numbered account in Zurich. He is initiating the wire transfer tomorrow morning during the signing ceremony." "What time?" 9:45, she said. "The meeting starts at 9. The signing is scheduled for 9:30. Once the signatures are verified, the funds from Ziegler Pharmaceuticals get released into the Origin escrow. Marcus has a backdoor command set up to auto-forward the liquidity immediately." "So we have 12 hours, I said. "Less," she corrected. "He moved the timeline up. He is panicked. He is going to sign the papers, trigger the transfer, and leave directly for the airfield. He isn't waiting for the champagne toast." She took a step toward me. "I gave you what you wanted. Now give me the escape route." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single slip of paper. I held it out. She snatched it from my hand. She unfolded it under the dim light. "What is this?" she asked, confusion clouding her face. "These are just coordinates and a code." "Go to that location," the voice modulator growled. "There is a secure transport waiting. Give the driver that code. They will take you to a safe zone where Marcus can never touch you." "Where is it?" she asked, moving toward her car. 3 blocks north, I said. She didn't say thank you. She scrambled back into the Porsche, started the engine, and tore out of the garage. I watched her go. The coordinates I had given her were for the loading dock of the federal building on 2nd Avenue. The code was the case file number Agent Miller had just opened. The secure transport would be a federal holding cell. Technically, I hadn't lied. In federal custody, Marcus couldn't touch her. She would be safe. She would also be in prison for the next 20 years as an accessory to attempted murder and international drug trafficking. I pulled off the mask, taking a deep breath of the stale air. The game of shadows was over. It was time to step into the light. I drove back to the safe house. The city was waking up. Delivery trucks were starting their rounds. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black, reflecting the neon signs of all-night diners. When I entered the apartment, the transformation was already complete. Lydia Caldwell was standing in front of the cracked, full-length mirror. The woman who had hidden in a warehouse wearing an oversized hoodie and trembling with shock was gone. She had cut her hair. The jagged, dyed black mess was trimmed into a sharp, severe pixie cut. It exposed the strong line of her jaw and the long, elegant curve of her neck. She had scrubbed the dye from her skin, leaving her face pale but fierce. She was wearing a white suit. It was a vintage piece she had kept in storage at the safe house. A suit she had worn 10 years ago when she took over the company after my father died. It was pristine, sharp-shouldered, and blindingly bright. It was the color of mourning in some cultures, but today, it was the color of an avenging angel. "You look like a warhead," I said, locking the door. "I feel like one," she replied, adjusting the cuffs of her jacket. "Did you get it?" I held up the recorder. "We have the order, we have the method, and we have the timeline. 9:45 this morning." "Good," she said. She turned to me. "What about Elena?" "She is on her way to the FBI," I said. "She thinks she is going to a safe house. By the time she realizes she is walking into a surrender, she will have already handed over the physical evidence she promised." Lydia nodded. There was no pity in her eyes. She made her choice. I sat down at the computer console. Now it is my turn. I cracked my knuckles and woke the screens. Agent Miller has the perimeter set. He has teams disguised as construction workers on the street and a tactical unit in the service elevator. But they cannot move until Marcus actually initiates the crime. We need him to sign the papers. We need him to attempt the transfer. That is the trigger for the felony. So we have to let the meeting proceed, Lydia said, sitting beside me. Yes, I said. But we are not just going to watch. We are going to produce the show. I opened the network bridge I had established earlier. The Origin Bio boardroom was a marvel of modern technology. It had a smart glass wall that could turn opaque with a button, press a 300-degree projection system, and integrated audio. He thinks he is going to show a PowerPoint about revenue growth and synergies, I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I am going to swap the deck. I accessed the presentation server. The file was there. merger_final_presentation_v2.pptx. I uploaded my own file. It was a video compilation. The photos of the drug warehouse, the pages of the notebook with the coordinates, the recording of the murder plot, and finally, the live feed from the security camera in the hallway outside the boardroom. I am embedding a logic bomb in the presentation software, I explained. At exactly 9:30, when he goes to the slide about future outlook, the system will lock him out. It will dim the lights. It will lock the doors. And it will play our movie. And then, Lydia asked. And then, I said, turning to her, the doors open, and you walk in. Lydia took a deep breath. She looked at the clock on the wall. 5:30 in the morning. I have been dead for 3 days, she said softly. I think I am ready to be alive again. We spent the next 2 hours in a state of hyper-focused preparation. I routed the audio from the boardroom microphones to our headsets so we could hear everything in real time. I set up a secondary connection to Agent Miller's comms so I could give the signal for the breach. The sun began to rise over Seattle. It was a rare, clear morning. The sky turned a bruised purple, then a bleeding orange. Across the city, in the lakeside mansion that was now a prison of his own making, Marcus Thorne was waking up. I switched the monitor view to the bedroom camera in the mansion. Marcus was sitting on the edge of the bed. He was wearing a fresh white shirt, his cufflinks already fastened. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin gray and clammy. He hadn't slept. The bottle of scotch on the nightstand was empty. He stood up, swaying slightly. He walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. He stared at his reflection in the mirror for a long time. He bared his teeth, checking them. He smoothed his hair. He adjusted his collar. I turned up the volume on the surveillance feed. I wanted to hear him. He leaned in close to the glass, his eyes mannequin wide. You are a survivor, Marcus, he whispered to himself. You are a winner. He picked up his tie, a crimson silk tie that looked like a slash of blood against his white shirt. He knotted it with jerky, aggressive movements. He put on his jacket. He checked the inside pocket to make sure his passport was there. He checked the other pocket for the primary RSA token. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. The fear that had crippled him the night before was being suppressed by sheer delusional narcissism. He had convinced himself that the voices, the music, the smells, they were all just stress. They were hallucinations brought on by grief and alcohol. Today was business, and he was good at business. He looked at himself one last time in the mirror. He smiled. It was a shark's smile, devoid of warmth, fueled only by hunger. They are nothing, he said to his reflection. Lydia was nothing. Ethan is nothing. Today is the day I become king. He turned and walked out of the bedroom, his footsteps heavy and decisive. He is moving, I said to Lydia. Lydia stood up. She picked up her purse. Let's go, she said. The king is about to lose his crown. We left the safe house for the last time. The air outside was crisp and cold. We got into my car. I didn't drive to the front entrance of Origin Bio. I drove to the delivery bay where Agent Miller was waiting with a team of 6 men in heavy tactical gear. Miller looked at Lydia. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of the woman whose autopsy report he had on his tablet. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, nodding respectfully. You look well. I look like Justice Agent Miller, she said. Are your men ready? We are positioned, Miller said. We have the lobby secured. We have the elevators disabled on the 40th floor. No one gets in or out unless we say so. Good, I said. We are going up to the projection booth. When the lights go out, that is your signal to breach the outer doors. Copy that, Miller said. We entered the service elevator. The metal doors slid shut, sealing us in. The numbers above the door started to climb. 10, 20, 30. My heart was pounding a steady drumbeat against my ribs. This was it. The culmination of 72 hours of sleeplessness, terror, and calculation. The elevator chimed at the 40th floor. The hallway was quiet. The plush carpet swallowed our footsteps. At the end of the hall, the double mahogany doors of the boardroom were closed. Through the frosted glass, I could see the blurry shapes of people sitting around the massive oval table. I could hear Marcus's voice. He was already speaking. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, his voice boomed, confident and smooth. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I know the circumstances are tragic, but we must look forward. I ushered Lydia into the small audiovisual control room, adjacent to the boardroom. It had a one-way mirror looking directly into the meeting. We stood there, looking down at them like gods, looking down at mortals. There were 12 people in the room, lawyers in gray suits, board members looking solemn, and at the head of the table, Marcus Thorne. He was standing gesturing at the screen behind him, which currently displayed a graph of projected earnings. The merger with Ziegler is not just a sale, Marcus was saying. It is a salvation. It provides the capital we need to expand our research into. He paused, looking for the right word. Into the future, he finished. He reached for the water glass on the table. His hand was shaking. He hid it quickly. Now, he said, if there are no further questions, I believe we are ready to sign. The lawyers slid a thick stack of documents across the polished wood. Marcus pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket. He uncapped it. Wait, I whispered. Not yet. He leaned over the paper. The pen hovered over the signature line. Agent Miller, I said into my headset. Target is engaging. Marcus signed his name, a flourish of black ink. Then he reached for the laptop in front of him. I am now initiating the transfer of the controlling shares, he said, and simultaneously accepting the wire transfer from Ziegler. He typed on the keyboard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the black RSA token. He looked at the code. He typed it in. He hit enter. On my screen in the control booth, a notification flashed. Wire transfer detected. Amount, $4.2 billion. Destination, Bank of Georgetown via intermediary. He did it, I said. The crime is complete. I looked at Lydia. She was staring at Marcus through the glass, her face unreadable. Do it, Ethan, she said. I hit the enter key on my laptop. In the boardroom, the lights suddenly died. Pitch blackness engulfed the room. There were gasps. A chair scraped against the floor. What is happening? Marcus's voice rang out high and panicked. Is it a power outage? Get the backup generator. Then the massive screen behind him flickered to life. It wasn't his PowerPoint. It was the photo of the warehouse in Kent, the pallets of drugs. A hush fell over the room. What is this? A board member asked. Marcus, what is this? Then the audio played. Elena's voice amplified to concert volume. Just do it. Do you want the 40 million or not? Marcus stood frozen in the glow of the screen, his silhouette dark and trembling. I pressed the button for the microphone. Good morning, Marcus, I said. My voice, undistorted, now boomed through the overhead speakers. Marcus spun around, looking up at the ceiling. Ethan. Open the doors, I said to Lydia. She stepped out of the control booth and into the hallway. She pushed the double doors open. The light from the hallway spilled into the dark boardroom, creating a silhouette of a woman in a white suit. She walked in. The click of her heels on the parquet floor was the only sound in the room. She stopped at the end of the long table opposite Marcus. The screen behind Marcus bathed him in a cold blue light. He squinted, trying to see who had entered. Lydia stepped into the light. Marcus dropped his pen. It clattered on the table, rolling off the edge and hitting the floor. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who was seeing his own death. "Hello, husband," Lydia said. The silence in the boardroom on the 40th floor was absolute. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, just before the explosive decompression. I stood just inside the double doors, slightly behind my mother, watching the scene unfold with a detached, clinical precision. The only light in the room came from the massive projection screen behind Marcus. A moment ago, it had displayed a graph of soaring profits. Now it was a wall of black pixels glowing with a malevolent hum. Then the text appeared. I had programmed it to type out slowly, character by character, like a teletype from a Judgment Day court. Assets frozen. Authorization code invalid, by order of the true owner. The red letters reflected off the polished mahogany table, painting the faces of the 12 board members in crimson light. They looked like statues, their mouths slightly open, their pens hovering over notepads. At the head of the table, Marcus Thorne stood frozen. His hand was still extended toward the laptop where he had just attempted to execute the wire transfer of $4.2 billion. His face was a mask of confusion that was rapidly cracking into terror. He blinked, looking from the screen to the open doors. He squinted against the sudden influx of light from the hallway. Lydia Caldwell took a step forward. The sound of her heels striking the parquet floor was sharp, distinct, and heavy. Click. She walked into the room, not as a ghost but as a force of nature. The white suit she wore seemed to absorb the ambient light, making her glow in the gloom. Her short hair, no longer the soft blonde bob of the submissive wife, but a sharp dark helmet of war, framed a face that was set in stone. A collective gasp swept through the room. It started with the representative from Ziegler Pharmaceuticals, a stout man named Mr. Henderson, who pushed his chair back with a screech of rubber on wood. "My God," Henderson whispered, his voice trembling. "Lydia," Marcus dropped the fountain pen. It hit the table with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white, his body swaying as if he were on the deck of a ship in a hurricane. Ghost," he stammered. "You are a ghost." Lydia did not stop. She walked until she was standing at the opposite end of the long oval table directly facing him. The distance between them was 20 feet of polished wood, but it felt like a canyon. "I am not a ghost, Marcus," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the voice of a CEO addressing a negligent employee. "I am the majority shareholder, and I am very much alive." "No," Marcus whispered, shaking his head violently. "I saw you. I saw the body, the doctor, the certificate." "You saw what you wanted to see," Lydia cut him off. "You saw an obstacle removed. You saw a bank account with a pulse. But you didn't check the pulse, did you, Marcus? You were too busy planning your trip to Zurich." She reached into her jacket pocket. The movement caused 3 security guards, my FBI team in disguise, to tense up near the walls, but she only pulled out a folded document. She tossed it onto the table. It slid across the smooth surface, spinning to a stop right in front of Mr. Henderson. "That is my affidavit," Lydia announced to the room. "Sworn this morning before a federal judge. It states that I never signed a power of attorney. It states that the will presented to this board 2 weeks ago is a forgery. And it states that any transfer of assets initiated by Marcus Thorne is null and void." Henderson picked up the paper, his hands shaking. He looked at Marcus. The look was not one of sympathy. It was the look of a man realizing he had almost bought a stolen car. "Marcus," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Is this true? Did you forge the signature? She is lying, Marcus screamed. The sudden volume made everyone jump. She is crazy. She has been unstable for years. Look at her. She faked her own death. Who does that? She is mentally incompetent. He pointed a shaking finger at her. Security! Get her out of here. She is trespassing. This is a hostile disruption of a corporate merger. I wouldn't call security if I were you, I said. I stepped out from the shadow of the doorway, moving to stand beside my mother. I was still wearing the dark tactical jacket, a stark contrast to the Italian suits in the room. I held a thick manila envelope in my hand. Marcus looked at me. His eyes widened. Ethan, you are in on this. You helped her with this sick stunt. I am an auditor, Marcus, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room without shouting. I audit things, and for the last 72 hours, I have been auditing you. I walked to the table. I didn't slide the envelope. I slammed it down. The thud reverberated through the glass walls. This is not a stunt, I said, addressing the board members. This is evidence. I opened the folder and spread the photos on the table. The high-resolution images of the warehouse in Kent. The pallets of viral vectors that were actually synthetic opioids. The black moleskin notebook with Marcus's handwriting. $85 million in illegal narcotics, I said, pointing to the photos. Stored in a warehouse leased under a shell company owned by Marcus Thorne. Transported using Origen Biologistics trucks. Insured by Origen Biopolicies. I looked at the Ziegler representatives. If you sign that contract today, you aren't buying a pharmaceutical company. You are buying a federal indictment. You are buying a drug cartel's distribution network. The room erupted. Drugs! A board member shouted, standing up. What is he talking about? This is preposterous, Marcus yelled, his face turning a blotchy purple. He is planting evidence. He is trying to tank the stock price so he can buy it back cheap. It is corporate sabotage. And the murder plot? I asked, raising my voice over the din. Was that sabotage too? I pulled the digital recorder from my pocket. I held it up. I have the audio, Marcus, I said. I have you telling Elena to put the tetrodotoxin in the chamomile tea. I have you discussing the timeline. I have you complaining about the cost of the poison. Marcus stopped shouting. His mouth snapped shut. The color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a wax figure. Elena, he whispered. She gave it to you. She made a deal, I said. Just like you tried to make a deal with the cartel. But her deal bought her a cell. Your deal bought you nothing. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The board members backed away from the table, putting distance between themselves and Marcus. They looked at him with horror and disgust. He was no longer the charismatic leader. He was a radioactive isotope. Mr. Thorne, Henderson said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. The deal is off. Ziegler Pharmaceuticals is withdrawing its offer immediately, and I will be contacting the SEC. You can't, Marcus cried, desperation creeping into his voice. The wire is already initiated. You can't stop it. The wire bounced, Marcus, I said calmly. Look at the screen. Marcus turned. The text on the screen had changed. Transaction failed. Reason: account frozen by FBI Cyber Division. Status: pending investigation. No, Marcus moaned. No, no, no. He looked around the room. He saw the judgment in their eyes. He saw the walls closing in. He looked at the window, 40 floors up. There was no escape. Security! He screamed again, his voice cracking. Where is my security team? Get in here! Arrest these people! Your security team is currently zip-tied in the basement. A deep voice boomed from the corner. Agent Miller stepped forward. He had been standing quietly by the window, disguised as a paralegal. He pulled his badge from his jacket pocket and held it up. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Miller announced. Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for money laundering, drug trafficking, and the attempted murder of Lydia Caldwell. Two other lawyers in the room stood up, drawing firearms from concealed holsters. They weren't lawyers. They were SWAT. "Hands on the table," Miller commanded, moving toward Marcus. "Do it now!" The room was chaos. Board members scrambled for the corners. Chairs were knocked over. Marcus looked at Miller. He looked at me. He looked at Lydia. A strange expression crossed his face. It wasn't surrender. It was the feral, cornered look of a creature that knew it was about to die and decided to take something with it. "I am not going to prison," Marcus hissed. "I am a king." He reached down. I thought he was reaching for the table to steady himself. But his hand darted to the leather briefcase, sitting on the floor beside his chair. "He has a gun!" I shouted, lunging forward. I was too far away. Marcus ripped the briefcase open. His hand came up holding a snub-nosed revolver, a backup piece he kept for executive protection. "Back off!" he screamed. He didn't aim at Miller. He didn't aim at me. He grabbed the nearest person, a 60-year-old woman named Mrs. Gable, the head of human resources. He wrapped his arm around her neck and jammed the barrel of the gun into her temple. "Nobody move!" Marcus shrieked, dragging the terrified woman backward toward the glass wall. "I will blow her brains out! I swear to God I will do it!" Mrs. Gable screamed, a high, thin sound of pure terror. "Drop the weapon!" Miller shouted, training his Glock on Marcus's head. "Thorne, drop it! There is nowhere to go!" "Get back!" Marcus yelled. He was sweating profusely now, his hair wild, his eyes darting around the room. "Open the doors! Clear the hallway! I want a helicopter on the roof in 10 minutes or she dies!" The boardroom froze. The air was thick with tension. The only sound was Mrs. Gable's sobbing and Marcus's ragged breathing. I stood 10 feet away, my hands raised. I looked at Lydia. She hadn't moved. She was standing perfectly still, her eyes locked on Marcus. She wasn't afraid. She was furious. "Marcus," Lydia said, her voice cutting through the panic. "Let her go. This is between you and me." "Shut up," Marcus screamed at her. "You did this. You ruin everything. You were supposed to die. Why couldn't you just die?" "Because you are incompetent, Marcus," Lydia said, taking a slow step forward. "Don't come closer." Marcus pressed the gun harder into Mrs. Gable's temple. The woman whimpered. "You are not a killer, Marcus," Lydia said, taking another step. "You are a coward. You hired Elena to poison me. You hired a cartel to move your drugs. You never get your hands dirty. You don't have the guts to pull that trigger." "Try me," Marcus yelled. "I have nothing to lose." "You have your dignity," Lydia said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Look at you, hiding behind a receptionist. You called yourself a king? You are a rat scurrying in a trap." "I built this company," Marcus roared, his composure completely gone. "I made it profitable. You just sat on your inheritance and played philanthropist. I did the work." "You stole the work," I said, stepping up beside my mother. "You stole the money. And now you are trying to steal a life to save your own. It is over, Marcus. The helicopter isn't coming. The only thing waiting for you is a cell." "I won't go," Marcus sobbed. Tears were streaming down his face now, mixing with the sweat. "I can't do prison. I can't." He dragged Mrs. Gable closer to the window. We were on the 40th floor. The glass was reinforced, but it wasn't bulletproof against point-blank range. "I will jump," he said, his voice trembling. "I will take her with me." Miller signaled his team. They spread out, trying to get an angle. But Marcus was using Mrs. Gable as a human shield. His back was to the glass. If they shot him, the recoil might pull the trigger on the hostage. Or worse, if he fell backward through the glass, he would take her down 400 feet to the pavement. It was a standoff, a stalemate. I looked at Marcus's eyes. They were wild, dilated, unhinged. He wasn't calculating anymore. He was reacting on pure instinct. I needed to break his focus. I needed to shatter the delusion one last time. "You are right, Marcus," I said softly. "You did build something." Marcus blinked, confused by the sudden change in tone. What? You built a legacy, I said, lowering my hands slowly. You are going to be famous. The biggest fraud in Washington history. They will write books about you. The man who had everything and threw it away for a blue vial. Shut up, Marcus muttered, his grip loosening slightly on Mrs. Gable's neck. Elena told us about the accounts, I lied. She told us about the Cayman money, but she also told us about the other account, the one you kept secret from the cartel. Marcus frowned. What other account? There is no other account. The skimming account, I said, improvising. The one where you took 5% off the top of the drug profits. The cartel doesn't know about that yet, Marcus, but they will when the trial starts. Do you think you are safe in prison? Do you think you are safe anywhere? Fear, fresh and sharp, spiked in Marcus's eyes. He knew he hadn't skimmed the cartel, but the seed of doubt was planted. Did Elena set him up? Did she falsify records to make it look like he skimmed? She lied, Marcus whispered. That bitch lied. For a split second his mind drifted from the hostage to the betrayal. His gun hand wavered, dropping just an inch. That was the inch Agent Miller needed. But before Miller could fire, Lydia moved. She didn't run. She didn't lunge. She simply picked up the heavy crystal pitcher of ice water from the conference table. And with a smooth underhand motion, the same motion she used to toss feed to the chickens at her summer farm, she hurled the contents of the pitcher directly into Marcus's face. A sheet of ice water in cubes slammed into him. It wasn't lethal. It was shocking. Marcus gasped, flinching instinctively, closing his eyes against the cold impact. Now! Miller shouted. The SWAT team surged forward. Marcus tried to raise the gun, but Mrs. Gable, seizing the moment of his distraction, stomped her heel down onto his instep with all her strength. Marcus howled in pain. His grip broke. Mrs. Gable threw herself to the floor. Before Marcus could recover, I tackled him. I hit him at full speed, my shoulder driving into his midsection. The air left his lungs in a whoosh. We crashed backward, slamming into the glass wall. The window shuddered but held. The gun skittered across the floor. Marcus tried to fight. He clawed at my face, screaming like a banshee. But he was an old man who had lived a soft life. I was younger, angrier, and fueled by 100 years of repressed rage. I pinned him to the floor. I grabbed his wrists and slammed them against the parquet. "It is over!" I yelled in his face. "Stay down! You ruined me!" He spit at me, blood from a bitten lip spraying on my collar. "I was a god!" "You were a parasite," I said. Then, the weight of 3 tactical officers landed on top of us. Strong hands grabbed Marcus, pulling him off me. I rolled away, gasping for breath. "Stop resisting!" Miller shouted. I watched from the floor as they forced Marcus onto his stomach. I heard the distinct ratchet of handcuffs being tightened. "Marcus Thorne," Miller recited, "you are under arrest." They hauled him to his feet. He looked small now. His suit was wet and crumpled. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked at Lydia. She was standing over the table, drying her hands on a napkin. She looked back at him. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just looked tired. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. Then she turned her back on him. Marcus opened his mouth to scream, to curse, to beg. But the officers shoved him toward the door. He was dragged out of the boardroom, his shoes dragging on the floor, leaving wet streaks on the wood. The room was silent again, save for the heavy breathing of the board members and the sobbing of Mrs. Gable, who was being comforted by a paramedic. I stood up. My tactical jacket was torn. My knuckles were bruised. I walked over to my mother. She reached out and adjusted my collar. Her hand was trembling just a little. "Nice tackle," she whispered. "Nice throw," I replied. We looked out the window. Below us, Seattle was waking up. The sun was fully risen now, burning off the morning fog. The sirens were wailing down on the street, a symphony of justice coming to clean up the mess. "Is it over?" she asked. "The audit is closed," I said. The accounts are balanced. But as I looked at the empty doorway where Marcus had been dragged out, I knew the paperwork was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, the numbers were finally on our side. The boardroom was a chaotic tableau of shattered glass, spilled water, and the raw, ugly noise of a man's ego collapsing in real time. The initial tackle had broken Marcus's physical hold on the hostage, but it had not broken his delusion. He had scrambled backward, kicking and flailing, wedging himself into the corner where the glass walls met the mahogany paneling. He was still holding the gun, waving it with the frantic, jerky movements of a cornered rat. The SWAT team held their perimeter laser sights, dancing on his chest, waiting for a clear shot that wouldn't risk a ricochet in the glass-enclosed room. "You think this is yours?" Marcus screamed, his voice shredding his throat. He pointed the gun not at us, but at the room itself, at the expensive view, the leather chairs, the corporate kingdom he believed he ruled. "I built this. I took a failing family business and turned it into a titan. I did the work." He turned his wild eyes toward Lydia, who stood calm and immovable in her white suit. "You were nothing," he spat, saliva flying from his lips. "You were just a checkbook, Lydia. You were a walking ATM machine with a pulse. You didn't care about the stock price. You didn't care about the legacy. You just wanted to save the whales and feed the orphans." "I wanted to do what was right," Lydia said, her voice cutting through his hysteria like a blade. "Right?" Marcus laughed, a manic, jagged sound. "You were going to donate it, 50%. You told me over dinner that you were going to liquidate half the family trust to build hospitals in Sudan. Half my capital. You were going to burn my potential on charity." He slammed his free hand against the glass. "That is why I did it. I didn't kill you for a mistress. I killed you for the capital. I had to save the money from your bleeding heart." It was the confession. Raw, unadulterated, and recorded by every microphone in the room. He had admitted that his motive wasn't passion. It was pure, unadulterated greed. He viewed his wife not as a partner, but as a leak in his financial hull that needed to be plugged. I took a step forward. The red laser from a sniper's rifle tracked across my shoulder, but I ignored it. I needed to end this without a bullet being fired. I needed to break him, not kill him. "It doesn't matter, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "The capital is gone." "Liar!" Marcus shrieked. "The wire is pending. I just need to override the freeze." "You can't override it," I said, locking eyes with him. "But even if you could, the account is empty." Marcus froze. "What?" "I spoke to Elena," I lied. It was the gamble of a lifetime. I needed to prey on his paranoia, on the seed of doubt I had planted earlier. "Why do you think she ran Marcus? Why do you think she tried to blackmail you?" I took another step. "She didn't just want 40%. She took it all. She used your passwords. She used the backdoor access you gave her. The account in Switzerland? The one you were going to retire to? She drained it an hour ago. She left you with zero, Marcus. You are not a king. You are a pauper." "No," Marcus whispered. The gun lowered an inch. "She wouldn't. She couldn't." "Check your phone," I urged him, pointing to the smartphone that had slid across the floor during the scuffle. It was lying face up, the screen glowing. "Check the balance notification. Go ahead. Look at what she did to you." It was the oldest trick in the book. Distraction. But to a narcissist like Marcus, the fear of being outsmarted was stronger than the fear of death. The idea that his inferior mistress had robbed him was a thought so intolerable, he had to verify it. His gaze flickered. For one fatal second, his eyes left the SWAT team and darted to the phone on the floor. He leaned forward just a fraction, reaching out with his left hand to grab the device. That split second was all the opening the tactical team needed. "Go! Go! Go!" Miller shouted. 3 officers surged forward like a tidal wave of black Kevlar. Marcus never touched the phone. The first officer hit him with a riot shield, pinning him against the wall with a bone-jarring crunch. The gun flew from his hand, spinning across the floor. The second officer swept his legs. Marcus hit the parquet floor face first. "Secure! Secure!" The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was sharp, metallic, and final. The cold steel bit into Marcus's wrists, locking tight. "Get off me!" Marcus screamed into the floorboards, his voice muffled. "I am Marcus Thorne. I am the CEO." "You are inmate number 4829, Miller said, hauling him up by his collar. They dragged him to his feet. The fight had gone out of him physically, but his eyes were still darting around looking for an exit, looking for a lawyer, looking for anyone who would listen to his delusions. He locked eyes with Lydia. She was standing 5 feet away. She looked down at the man who had shared her bed for 10 years, the man who had poisoned her tea and plotted her erasure. "Lydia," Marcus gasped. "Lydia, please. Tell them. It was a mistake. I can fix it. We can fix this." Lydia didn't blink. She didn't cry. She simply leaned in close, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of a tombstone. "You spent 10 years talking, Marcus," she said. "You talked about your vision. You talked about your genius. You talked over me at dinners. You talked over me in board meetings. You thought my silence was weakness." She straightened up, smoothing the lapel of her white suit. "Never underestimate a silent woman," she said. "We hear everything." "Get him out of here," Miller ordered. 2 officers grabbed Marcus by the arms and marched him toward the door. He was weeping now, ugly, heaving sobs of self-pity. He didn't look back. He was dragged out of the sunlight and into the hallway, leaving only the scent of his expensive cologne and his fear hanging in the air. "What about the girl?" I asked Miller. "Lobby," Miller said, tapping his earpiece. "My team just picked her up." We walked over to the window and looked down. 40 floors below, on the circle drive of the Origen Bio headquarters, a scene was playing out in miniature. A silver Porsche was parked at the curb. A woman in a trench coat was standing by the open trunk, handing a laptop bag to a man in a dark uniform. She thought he was the extractor I had promised. She thought she was buying her freedom. Then, the driver spun her around. We saw her struggle. We saw the flash of sunlight on handcuffs. We saw her being placed into the back of an unmarked black SUV. "Got her," I said. "Accessory to attempted murder. RICO conspiracy. She won't see daylight until she is 60. Elena Rostova had bet on the wrong horse, and then she had tried to bet against the house. She had lost everything. The boardroom began to clear. The paramedics were tending to Mrs. Gable. The board members were huddled in the corner, frantically calling their lawyers and PR firms to distance themselves from the disaster. "Come on, Mom," I said, offering her my arm. "Let's go home." We took the elevator down. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. We walked out the front doors of the building. The rain had stopped. The notorious Seattle gray had broken, and for the first time in weeks the sun was piercing through the clouds. It washed over the wet pavement, making the city look clean, new, and bright. Photographers were already gathering at the police line shouting questions, but we ignored them. We got into my car and drove away, leaving the sirens and the scandal in the rearview mirror. The news broke an hour later. It was everywhere. Billionaire CEO arrested in drug ring bust. The dead wife returns. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and brutal. With the recording, the notebook, the physical drugs, and the testimony of a flipped Elena Rostova Marcus's high-priced defense team didn't stand a chance. The federal prosecutors threw the book at him. Money laundering, international drug trafficking, wire fraud, attempted first-degree murder. The judge, a woman who had no patience for arrogance, delivered the sentence 6 months later. 150 years. No possibility of parole. Marcus Thorne would die in a 6x8 concrete box, wearing a jumpsuit that cost less than the handkerchiefs he used to carry. But that was later. Right now, there was one last thing we had to do. I drove us to the cemetery. The same cemetery where I had stood in the rain 3 days ago, mourning a woman who wasn't dead. The grass was still muddy. The wreaths were still there, though the flowers were beginning to wilt. And in the center of the plot stood the headstone. Lydia Caldwell, beloved wife, rest in peace. It was a lie carved in granite, a monument to Marcus's victory. Lydia stood in front of it. She was still wearing her white suit, though the hem was stained with mud. "He chose the font," she said, staring at the stone. "He hated serifs. He said they were old-fashioned." "He got a lot of things wrong," I said. I walked to the trunk of my car and opened it. I reached past the tire iron and pulled out the sledgehammer I had bought at a hardware store on the way over. It was heavy with a long fiberglass handle. I walked back and held it out to her. "Do you want me to do it?" I asked. Lydia looked at the hammer. Then she looked at the stone. "No," she said. "I'll do it." She took the hammer. It was heavy for her, but she gripped it with both hands, her knuckles white. She planted her feet. She took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of wet earth and cedar. She wasn't just looking at a stone. She was looking at 10 years of manipulation. She was looking at the fear, the gaslighting, the tea that tasted slightly bitter, the feeling of being small in her own house. She raised the hammer over her head. For a second, she held it there, silhouetted against the setting sun. She looked like a statue of justice, unblindfolded and angry. Then she swung. Crack. The sound was like a gunshot. The hammer struck the top corner of the marble, sending chips of stone flying into the air. A fissure appeared running down through the name Lydia. She swung again. Crack. "I am not dead," she shouted, her voice echoing through the quiet cemetery. She swung again, and again. Thud. Crack. Crack. She was breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead, but she didn't stop. She hammered the stone until the name was unreadable. She hammered it until the beloved wife was nothing but dust and gravel. She hammered it until the lie was destroyed. Finally, she stopped. The hammer dropped from her hands, thudding onto the grass. The headstone was a ruin, a jagged stump of rock. She stood there, her chest heaving, her hands shaking. I stepped forward and put my arm around her shoulders. "It is done, Mom." She looked at the rubble. Then she looked at me. A smile, a real, genuine smile, broke across her face. "Yes," she said. "It is done." She turned away from the grave. She didn't look back. She stepped over the debris of her past life and walked toward the car, toward the sun, toward a future that belonged only to her. The screen fades to black. The sound of the hammer striking stone echoes one last time. Crack, before silence. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and retribution, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Ethan and Lydia's plan. Don't forget to subscribe to Calm Revenge stories like this video and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to us. Stay safe and remember, the truth always wins.